Clearly visible in slow motion. First one missile and then a second. The Serbs pounding Kosovo's rebels with mortar and gunfire. A battle that's lasted for days, just yards from Albania, as refugees pour across the border here.
Kosovo's population is 90% Albanian. They say it's ethnic cleansing. The Serbs insist they're fighting terrorists.
We came across these Kosovo Liberation Army fighters trying to pinpoint Serb gunners in the mountains.
Refugees from Kosovo reaching Albania today have been reporting some of the worst Serb atrocities since the war began.
They came in their thousands today, and with them more accounts of killing and rape. This woman was told by border guards she had to choose between her 2.5-year-old twins. They'd only let one go across to Albania, the other would stay in Serbia.
The strain on Albania is growing by the day. The poorest country in Europe is now home to more than 300,000 Kosovo refugees. It is a humanitarian catastrophe that NATO didn't plan for, but one which they now have to urgently tackle.
The images from the borders of Macedonia and Albania have forced the alliance's hand. It's forced it to intensify its campaign.
Several times today, bombing runs by NATO jets against Serb positions just on the hills here.
In the last hour, NATO has effectively admitted hitting a market and hospital complex in Niš today.
A low-flying jet attacked them 3 times, hit both sides of the road, and then the first 3 trailers in their convoy.
NATO today admitted and apologised for hitting houses in the southern Serbian town of Sedelice. 20 people, including children, were killed.
There are many killed and many died.
NATO announced this evening it was reviewing targeting procedures after it admitted bombing China's embassy in Belgrade by mistake.
According to the Chinese, 3 missiles fired from different directions hit the building, which housed both the embassy and residential quarters. NATO's desire to keep up the pressure on President Milosevic appears to have led to another blunder.
It is inevitable when you prosecute a conflict that there will be sad occasions when innocent people die.
Good evening. NATO stands accused tonight of another tragic bombing error, by far the worst yet in the campaign against Yugoslavia.
The first cameras to reach the scene recorded the mangled corpses of Albanians apparently caught in a heavy NATO airstrike.
This was an isolated, tragic event, while the ethnic cleansing of Kosovo, which has led to the killing of thousands of people and the relocation of hundreds of thousands, is a deliberate and systematic crime.
I can reassure you that the military damage has been minimal to Pristina Corps and the Yugoslav army as a whole.
Refugees from Jakova tell us bombing simply isn't enough. We're glad about the airstrike, says this man, but what we really want are NATO ground troops.
We may very well be faced with ground troops before there's anything close to a compromise.
Soldiers can't talk politics, but there is a growing feeling of impatience.
I believe now we have to do what is required to prevail. We have to indicate a willingness to use ground forces, and that means getting them ready.
Come forward!
No, just do it from here, mate.
RAF tornadoes taking off into clear blue skies. ITN flew with them today on a training mission, but their next sorties may be bombing raids into Serbia. There, the flying conditions will not be so kind, and the pilots could well be flying into anti-aircraft fire and possibly surface-to-air missiles. They will operate from RAF Bruggen in Germany, so they will need to refuel several times mid-flight. When they do, the aircraft hover around the mother tanker like impatient kittens at feeding time. For every pilot and every plane, it is a highly practiced and skilled manoeuvre. On the ground, the tornadoes are at their highest state of readiness. When NATO decided 2 days ago to beef up its operations in the air campaign against Yugoslavia, 4 of these Tornado aircraft were immediately assigned to NATO forces. Today, 4 more have been declared fully operational and ready for missions over Serbia. The Tornadoes deliver bombs which are guided to their targets by this laser pod, the plane's so-called Magic Eye.
Well, this is the clever bit on the airplane, apart from the crew in the cockpit. But of course, the bomb sees the reflected laser energy and guides itself to the target.
That is, provided the weather is good. They will be hoping for clear skies too over Serbia. Kevin Dunn, ITN, at RAF Bruggen in Germany.
Well, earlier I spoke about the build-up of tension to the Russian ambassador to the United Nations, Sergei Lavrov. But first I asked him about the 3 captured American soldiers.
It's clear, beyond any doubt, that they were not United Nations personnel. They used to be with the United Nations preventive mission in Macedonia. After this mission has been discontinued, the personnel of this US battalion, which served under Unpredep, was transferred to NATO command, and they were under NATO command, wearing American uniform with no UN insignia. They were traveling in a camouflage-painted Humvee, not in a UN white vehicle. And the Secretariat of the UN confirmed to us just today that they have nothing to do with the UN operation in Macedonia. They are NATO troops.
And therefore Serbia is justified in capturing them?
I didn't say that. We don't know the exact details of what has happened, and I understand this is being now established by various people, but I can only say that a war is a war, and those who go to war should be prepared to take some consequences.
There is a fleet sailing from Sebastopol. There has been some degree of activity in the Northern Fleet, which suggests that tension is beginning to increase between the 2 former superpowers.
We have always been saying that we would be guided by our national security interests, and the conflict in Yugoslavia, the attack by NATO on Yugoslavia in violation of international law, is certainly something which is infringing upon our national interests, and we want to follow the events closely. Therefore, we are sending one reconnaissance ship into the Mediterranean, which would help us to get first-hand information and to analyze it properly from the point of view of our national interests.
Might those national interests extend to allowing Belgrade some of that intelligence?
Our national interests are based strictly on international law. And in following those interests, we are not violating international law. Whatever is prohibited by international law, we wouldn't do. That's my answer. Whatever is not prohibited, we would certainly consider.
But could you find yourselves needing to assist the Serbian position, at least to hold the ground as it stands now? Could you find yourselves needing perhaps to provide either intelligence or support of some sort to enable them to survive?
We are providing moral and political support. We are providing humanitarian assistance. As far as exchange of information is concerned, I am sure that this is taking place, and this is not something which is beyond international law. So my answer is yes. In those forms which I described, I see no inhibition for Russia to support Serbia.
Ambassador, thank you very much indeed for talking with us. Russia's ambassador to the United Nations, Sergei Lavrov, talking to me earlier. We're joined now by James Woolsey, former director of the CIA. James Woolsey, that must almost take you back to your era when relations were decidedly frosty. Should we worry remotely that the Russians are taking a line?
I don't think we should let the Russians worry us. The Russians don't have any conventional capability that they can usefully threaten us with. We need to focus on the fact that Milosevic, a thug and a killer, has now kidnapped 3 American soldiers out of a sovereign country, Macedonia, where they were with the permission of the Macedonian government, and is threatening to put on a Stalinist-style show trial. I think we need to reorient our policy in the aftermath of not only this, but particularly the murders that he's been conducting for a week or so now in Kosovo, to an overall effort to bring down the Milosevic regime.
Well, we're on very delicate territory here, aren't we? We don't know precisely what happened on the border. It well may be that they were in a disputed area of border. After all, these forces are at war with Mr. Milosevic.
The Serbs will lie about that. It seems most unlikely to me that these troops would have been patrolling across the border into Serbia. The Serbs may well claim all of Macedonia. They're perfectly capable of claiming much in the Balkans that is not really theirs. But it seems to me, short of putting troops into Kosovo, NATO now has to focus on the fact that it is not just the Balkans that are at issue here. If we knuckle under to hostage-taking and Stalinist show trials and genocide by Milosevic, people like Saddam Hussein and Kim Jong-il in North Korea are going to notice. We have to now, I think, take a very firm stance against Milosevic, and I think we should try to bring down his regime.
As you well know, we're in no position to take a very firm stance on the ground. We haven't got the forces there, and there's certainly no commitment either in your country or ours to put any ground forces in.
Well, I disagree with President Clinton's having stated in advance of this operation that ground forces could not be used. It might be that they're not necessarily going to be used, but they ought to at least be brought to the region. I think we should seriously work on arming the KLA and assisting it in its operations against Serbia and Kosovo. That's the only thing that can be done relatively quickly to stop Milosevic's murders of tens of thousands of Kosovars.
One of the reasons why anybody is particularly worried about what's happening in Serbia is the wider ramifications. Now, you heard the Russian ambassador say that they regard what's happening there as impinging upon their national interests. They're moving a ship into the region. It's a reconnaissance ship, and he, as you heard, said that within the bounds of international law, and heaven knows what that is, they will pass on intelligence to Belgrade. Should that worry us?
I think we're capable with communications security of denying them very much important intelligence. It's a flamboyant move by the Russians and a very hostile one. I think one of the things that we should seriously consider doing as Russia operates in this sort of fashion is asking ourselves whether this is the kind of Russian regime that the West wants to bail out with IMF money, for example, from their past profligacy.
Well, you know, if we don't, we'll get something very different. The sort of Zhirinovsky regime, would you fancy that?
Well, certainly not, but that's not necessarily what's going to follow if we take a firm line with Russia. You can't start caving in to tin-horn dictators like Milosevic and troubled countries such as Russia trying to flex their muscle in order to appease their own nationalists when they start doing things like taking hostages and conducting genocide.
James
you need
Woolsey,
to keep the focus on the genocide.
James Woolsey, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
At least 630,000 Kosovars have now been forced out. That's a third of the population. In Kosovo itself, the queue to the Albanian border runs for mile upon mile. Countless refugees telling stories of widespread killings by the Serbs.
What I'm mostly coming across is individual killings of 1 and 2 and 3 people aimed primarily at hastening the process of ethnic cleansing or at hastening the process of looting. From the village of Ostrazuk, 1,000 men were separated away and their fate is unknown.
At least 80% are women and children coming across. The men seem to have gone. There is no real aid at the border, instead an agonizing cold wet drive for over an hour to the nearest town, Kukas. There, aid agencies are simply overwhelmed, as are the Albanians. Able to do little more than cram people onto civilian or army trucks and buses to go south, and another journey then of at least 10 hours to the capital Tirana. Barring a massive helicopter airlift, this is the only route in for international aid, which has so far delivered virtually nothing. As you can see, it goes on for mile upon miserable mile, and it's more evidence, if evidence were needed, of the futility of NATO's bombing campaign thus far. It almost seems as if President Slobodan Milosevic has defeated NATO without even bothering to fight it. So NATO, having failed to achieve its stated objective of stopping the Serb offensive, the world flounders around in search of a plan B. The possibility of establishing safe havens in Kosovo with full military protection is being raised. But Europe has not seen displaced people in these numbers since the Second World War. By the time any safe havens could be established, would there be any Kosovar Albanians left in Kosovo to save? At the border, surrounded by this catastrophe, Albania's Deputy Prime Minister can only point the finger at Slobodan Milosevic.
He is using all his military arsenal and propaganda to terrorize the people and to force them to leave Kosovo.
But NATO is fighting a war to stop this.
I think that only ground presence of NATO in Kosovo can stop it.
No prospect of that, no prospect of safe havens in Kosovo, and no sign yet of anything like adequate aid in Albania for these people. Alex Thompson, Channel 4 News, Kukës.
The Macedonian government said today it just couldn't cope with the numbers and closed the border. Tens of thousands of Kosovo refugees are now being held in no man's land. Macedonia fears if so many are allowed in, its own fragile peace will crack. So the army has been mobilised. The suffering is unspeakable. Red Cross workers say 11 people, including 2 babies, died here last night in the driving rain and freezing cold. It's going to get worse. NATO said today that up to 300,000 more Kosovo Albanians are on the roads heading towards the borders.
At this rate, the Serb security forces would have more or less emptied Kosovo in between 10 to 20 days from now.
These NATO troops were meant to be peacekeepers in Kosovo, but they've become aid workers in Macedonia, organising supplies from Britain and other countries.
We are working extremely closely with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees, UNHCR, to do whatever we can to alleviate the condition of the people who are waiting at the border.
As the Kosovo Albanians are bussed to a new tented camp in Macedonia, Britain today suggested NATO troops should establish sanctuaries on the border. Germany has agreed to accept some refugees, but only if other European Union countries share the burden. But the primary policy remains the same: keep on bombing.
We are now in a position where we have to continue until the whole policy of ethnic cleansing in Kosovo is defeated and seen to be defeated. And Milosevic should be under no illusions that we intend to carry on until that is achieved.
As the refugees prepare for another night in the cold, NATO is waking up to the consequences of its policy. A NATO statement tonight said that Yugoslavia would have to accept the refugees back, protected by an international security force. That's something President Milosevic is unlikely ever to accept.
This afternoon, for the first time since this crisis began, American helicopters were beating the air in the skies over northern Albania. They brought in aid, food packets and water that had earlier been flown into Tirana. It was, they said, the beginning of a major airlift.
This is very close to hostile territory. What did you think as you flew in here?
Well, we're pretty much masked in here. I don't think we have too many problems right here.
You're pretty exposed, though, so close to the border, aren't you?
To a degree.
In reality, though, most supplies are still coming by road, and so far, it is the Albanians themselves who've limited the scale of this disaster. Aid may be coming in now, but the Albanians are equally seeking answers to bigger questions, like how, in the long term, they are supposed to cope with these huge numbers. The Macedonians are equally concerned, but they agreed today to set up an international sanctuary to care for 100,000 refugees. Many there are still out in the open, fighting to survive, trying to protect their young, waiting for medical care. The United States has now said it will take some of these people in.
We will do a burden sharing to temporarily take out of Macedonia large numbers of the refugees for temporary asylum until it is safe for them to go back to their homes in Kosovo and can start their lives in freedom.
Many have been sleeping out in the open in Albania too, despite the hospitality of the local people, though tents have now begun to arrive. On the border itself, there is still no end in sight to the exodus. At the remoter crossings, almost everyone arrives on foot. 100,000 small, shuffling steps into exile. Tom Bradby, ITN, on the Albania-Kosovo border.
This is the border between Kosovo and Macedonia, a vision more hellish with every passing day. The Macedonian government now estimates that 115,000 people are trying to cross. People they don't want, refugees who they say should be NATO's problem. Britain's Claire Short arrived today, determined to do something to relieve this wretched logjam. As she watched, another body was brought out. It's an increasingly common sight. But her presence did seem to have an effect. A first group of refugees were at last allowed to move to a camp run by NATO forces. As British soldiers handed out food, there was anger at what many see as Macedonian indifference. But Claire Short wants action, not recriminations.
I'm not interested in blame. I'm interested in the people getting fed and getting medical care and being cared for.
4,000 people are in the care of NATO tonight. Their suffering alleviated, although far from over. This camp is at last offering shelter to some of the refugees. It's a start, albeit a small one. But across those hills, on the border with Kosovo, there remain scenes of almost unimaginable misery.
NATO today released this cockpit video of one bridge coming under attack from the air. The exact location and timing of the bombing were not revealed.
Thank you very much.
NATO's strategy seems clear enough. The air campaign is steadily being stepped up day by day. This American B-1 bomber arrived back at base in Gloucestershire this morning after another nighttime mission. The weather in Kosovo is improving, giving NATO a clear window of opportunity to identify and attack new targets.
The weather, which had previously been against us, has now improved considerably, and NATO will be continuing to increase and intensify its attacks.
Good evening. The Yugoslav army ceasefire begins right now, this minute, and the refugees have been invited home. But it's already been dismissed as a hollow half measure. NATO promises unrelenting and undiminished bombing, but has a chance at peace been rejected? We asked the Defence Secretary.
I think that this is not an offer of peace, it's simply a cynical ploy. It apparently offers a ceasefire, but we've heard that before. But it doesn't give an indication that the refugees will get back and safely to their homes. It doesn't talk about an international force. It doesn't talk about all of the killing troops being withdrawn from Kosovo. But it is, besides being a ploy, also a sign of weakness and a sign that NATO is beginning to have an effect on the killing machine in Kosovo. And as such, it's welcome, but we'll keep on the bombing until the people who have been displaced are allowed to get back to their homes again.
But what actually would they need to offer to stop the bombing? They have said they will pull troops back to their barracks. They've said the refugees can return home under the auspices of the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. What more do they need to do?
Does anybody seriously think that a regime that has expelled something like 1 million people from Kosovo that has been perpetrating the worst violence that some people have seen since medieval times, that has been systematically, ethnically cleansing that part of the country, is going to change its mind instantaneously, and that we can accept their words for it. We've laid down our conditions. They are reasonable conditions. They were accepted by the Kosovar Albanians right at the beginning of the process. When President Milosevic looks as though he's going to accept that, then of course the bombing will stop. But in the meantime, this is just a ploy.
But if you don't accept their word for it, what will you accept? I mean, sooner or later you're going to have to talk to them, aren't you? And you can't talk to them while you're bombing them.
Well, the reality is that, of course, they're only coming back with these offers. And remember, this is the second offer in 7 days because damage is being done to the military machine. But the Balkans are littered with Milosevic's ceasefires and Milosevic's promises, and we'll have to see more than just a cynical ploy offered at this appropriate time.
Well, you say this is an indication of NATO's success, but your own briefings don't really reveal very much of that, because by your own admission, you've hardly taken out any of the Yugoslav tanks. You've also admitted that you haven't taken out any troops because you said they aren't apparent to NATO planes. So there hasn't really been much military success, has there?
We have caused huge damage to the military machine in Yugoslavia. Milosevic is much weaker, and this desperate attempt, this cynical attempt to put forward a pretend ceasefire at this time, I think is the best evidence we've got of that so far. His air defences have been attacked, his command and control has been attacked, his ammunition and fuel dumps have been badly attacked. He is seriously weakened, and that is why I believe he is putting forward this hollow gesture at the present moment. And we've got to have the assurances on the conditions that would allow these million displaced people the chance of getting back to their own homes in safety, and that is not what he's offering at the present moment.
All right, but what will you actually do now on the ground? Will NATO airplanes continue to bomb Yugoslav troops even if they're in their barracks and not fighting back?
Well, we'll continue to attack the military capabilities of Serbia, which have been engaged in this orgy of human and property destruction.
So that's a yes,
over these past weeks. We are going to continue to attack the military machine until he has accepted the conditions that allows people to get back.
But will you attack troops in their barracks if they're not fighting back?
I don't believe these troops are going to go back to their barracks. I don't believe that he means what he says. There is no evidence to suggest that he is going to take the troops out of the area, which would be the only guarantee that these people would have, that they were going to have half a chance of living in peace and safety. He's expelled over 1 million people from that part of the world. We're going to have more than words before people are ever likely to go back to Kosovo.
But you see, Minister, there are other people tonight saying that this is a golden opportunity, and that if troops go back to their barracks and there's a ceasefire, NATO could actually walk in and escort the refugees back into Kosovo, seize this moment, and turn the situation around.
This is a moment of weakness by Milosevic, but it's not that ultimate moment of weakness. It's a moment of cynical duplicity that we've seen so often in the past.
But why not?
Does anybody imagine that he seriously means that he is going to allow all of the people that he expelled, all of the people that have been driven from the homes that have been bulldozed, allow them back in just because it happens to be on the eve of the Orthodox
But why not show
Easter?
strength now and take NATO troops to lead refugees back to their homes?
Well, he can show instantaneously by allowing access to the refugees at the border who may well be in serious suffering at the present moment. Let him show by deeds and not by words that he's interested now in suing for peace. Otherwise, I think people will genuinely believe that here we've got a man who has been weakened, but who has absolutely no intention of giving up the gains that he has got by violence and the ethnic cleansing that he has driven through in these last few weeks.
The Defence Secretary George Robertson. Well, the Serbs may say the refugees can return to Kosovo, but there's no likelihood that any of them will be willing to do so in the foreseeable future. As they continue to pour towards the borders, their plight worsens. The International Development Secretary Claire Short, just back from a visit to a refugee camp, today criticised the Macedonian authorities for forcing Kosovan refugees onto flights out of their country against their will. But she confirmed that Britain and other NATO countries would take refugees temporarily.
It's absolutely unacceptable that anyone is removed on an airlift without agreeing to go. People are desperate there because families are being broken up. It's just a further cruelty to remove them when they haven't found their children, wives or husbands. Secondly, it's absolutely right that the international community should assist and voluntarily help people to come out temporarily and then be able to return.
Well, our chief correspondent Alex Thompson spent last night among the refugees stranded in no man's land between the borders of Kosovo and Macedonia at Blair. He has this report on what he witnessed.
Slobodan Milosevic's offer will not stem the exodus. Macedonian riot police preventing people making a run to the buses to escape the hell of Blair refugee camp. Aid workers throw them bottles of water, but this is at 3 a.m. They are queuing 24 hours a day for the pitiful supply of buses just to get out. Many have stood here for 12 hours or more until they collapse.
I had one child dying in front of me, basically. We had a woman dying here. The first night we started, we had a woman dying. And then it's just like, it's a lot of people dying, especially children.
We were smuggled in past the police and army under cover of darkness. Countless people told us only an independent Kosovo would take them home after the wanton and often quite pointless violence they'd witnessed.
They have taken all the private lorries, and they have also taken the cars they liked, and burned the ones they didn't want.
And as the sun came up, a woman told us that she'd queued with her children for 3 days to escape and had simply given up. Which could be a fatal decision. There's hardly any sanitation for 20,000 people. Human waste, vomit and rubbish carpet the mud. More than 20 people have died here already, just when they thought they had at last reached safety. Having spent just one night here, it's pretty easy to see why it is that the Macedonians don't want journalists anywhere near this place. The United Nations said they could have this place emptied in 2 days. Just 10 miles down the road that way, a British Army field hospital lies all but unoccupied. And no matter what the problems Macedonia might have in accommodating a large number of Kosovar Albanians, it is pretty difficult to see any justification for allowing people to live and die in their own filth on an open hillside. But Macedonia blames NATO for this. They said it promised a transit camp in 24 hours and didn't deliver it in 4 days, hence this mess. It is now reckoned more than 1 million are displaced, almost half the entire Kosovar Albanian people. Serb transport trains dump them a few miles north and they walk the rest along the railway that runs through Blair camp, where conditions are so bad that at least one person seriously wanted to go back to Kosovo.
I would like to go to Kosovo again in my house, if it's still, because I heard that they grenaded houses in Blagovac, and I don't know if, but I think it would be better in my house to be, not here. It's very, very bad.
But like almost everybody else here, she will not go back just because Slobodan Milosevic is talking peace. Not after the terror and the murders. So after 12 hours, we walked out of this place, leaving 20,000 filthy, desperate people still wanting to go in the same direction, out of Kosovo, ceasefire or no ceasefire. Alex Thompson, Channel 4 News at the Blair refugee camp.
Now, you might recall that last week we made contact with an ethnic Albanian journalist living in the Kosovan capital, Pristina. We dramatised the story then, that she told us, because we were warned that to identify her would put her life in danger. But we can now identify Jaracina Tuhina because she left Pristina last week and is here with us now. First of all, describe what it was like, because there have been no Western journalists there. We don't really have a clear idea.
Of course, nobody has a clear idea what was going on. Pristina now is a city of ghosts. Out of 300,000 citizens that used to live there, you can hardly find not more than 200 of them. Everybody was deported.
How?
Special police units and paramilitary units get into your house and just give you 5 minutes to get out. I know cases that people didn't have a chance to take IDs, not speaking about the essential things. And everybody, people that are being expelled from their houses are advised to go towards railway station. Therefore, for days and days, railway station is full.
Well, I think we have some pictures, actually, of those trains on which many of the refugees were forced to go out. I mean, this is a remarkable scene, very evocative, isn't it? I mean, what was that like?
Schindler's List, Steven Spielberg's. We have lived it. We thought it was a film, but it was just like it. I mean, people are getting in the trains, but they'll never know where they're heading to. There are a few stops. I spoke with the people that traveled with the train, and they told me that they were stopped several times towards Macedonia, and every time it was a shock. Either somebody's going to come in and happen like it happened in Strpce in Bosnia, for example, or they were going to be kicked out.
All right, now stay with us for a moment, because on the phone now from Belgrade is Predrag Simic, who's a foreign policy advisor to the Yugoslav government. Mr. Simic, when we hear stories like that here of what's been happening in Pristina, did you really expect that an offer like today's would work?
Look, the exode of the population of Kosovo, Albanian, Serb, and all the others started 2 weeks ago, and it's going on. Trains are going also to Belgrade, bringing the refugees, and there are more and more than coming here.
But what was the point of making an offer that wasn't even as good as the position at the Rhombouillet peace talks? It must have been clear that NATO wouldn't accept this.
Well, look, today two governments of Republic of Serbia and federal government issued the common statement with 3 points. That on the occasion of the Eastern, there should be unilateral ceasefire of the Yugoslav armed forces and security forces. Second, that the representative of government, in cooperation with the representative of Albanians, and in particular with Mr. Rugova, start preparing political settlement. And point 3, to adopt with the representative of Albanians the program of return of refugees. Today on the press conference, Deputy Prime Minister Vudašković suggested to close the frontiers and to invite all the refugees to stay where they are and to return to their homes.
Mr. Simic, I want to put that point about inviting the refugees back to Geracina here in the studio. Would you go back to Pristina?
After this appeal?
I think that at this moment it's substantial that all refugees, be them Albanians, Serbs, or anybody else.
Mr. Simic, let me just hear why. I mean, we have a person who's just been expelled from Pristina in the studio. Why wouldn't you go back?
Well, I can tell you the concrete example. I was in my house still by the time when military headquarters appealed last week. It was last Wednesday or Thursday, I'm not so sure. They appealed for people to stay in their houses, not to leave the houses, and they called the others to get back. And a day after, my family got kicked out.
Geracina Tuhina and Mr. Simic in Belgrade, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, Henry Kissinger, the former US Secretary of State, has been vocal in criticizing the West's strategy in the run-up to the attacks. A little while ago, I asked him whether NATO had made a fundamental mistake in ruling out the use of ground troops from the beginning.
I think we should not have entered the war with such a statement. I don't think it would have affected the ethnic cleansing of Kosovo, because the Serbs know that it will take a month or two to assemble the forces to undertake ground action. So the only issue is, should we have assembled those forces before we started launching bombing attacks?
Do you think now we should be considering such action?
I believe now we have to do what is required to prevail, and that means that we have to indicate a willingness to use ground forces, and that means getting them ready.
The justification always given is the fear of body bags, and I suppose that must go back to Vietnam. Do you think America is hamstrung by the legacy of Vietnam?
Well, that raises the question whether one should enter wars which the public doesn't understand sufficiently to be willing to pay the inevitable price of war. I've never heard of an immaculate war in which you don't suffer casualties.
But do you think the American people are now ready to see casualties? I mean, do you think this president has perhaps misread what the American people are prepared to accept?
I think what the American people is prepared to accept depends on how the issue is presented to them. So far it has presented, the operation in the Balkans has been presented to them as the least of bad options. That's not a stirring battle cry. And I want to point out, lest I be misunderstood, I did not agree with the diplomacy that led up to the outbreak of the war. But now that we are in the war, we have to prevail. The future of NATO and of American credibility depends on it.
How does NATO now get itself out of all this?
By winning. I know that there's no complicated way. We have to continue the bombing operation, though, to use Churchill's phrase of 50 years ago, we're going to start hitting the same, we're going to start hitting rubble at some point. But we have to continue the bombing operation. And we have to assemble ground forces to threaten an invasion. I don't think that the Serbs can continue indefinitely. I agree with the president when he says he expects us to prevail. And I think it is necessary for NATO now to begin thinking what it is actually we're fighting for, what is the purpose of the exercise, and what are the terms we're going to put forward.
But the Allies of today already rejected an offer of a ceasefire from Yugoslavia. How do they get round this problem whereby they want an objective, which is the return of the refugees to Kosovo, but they can't negotiate because they are currently bombing?
What seem to me to be the only terms we can settle for is an end to Serbian military operations, a withdrawal of Serbian forces, and the negotiation of a new status for Kosovo.
Good evening. NATO announced today that it's sending 8,000 ground troops to Albania to help with the humanitarian aid effort for the refugees from Kosovo. The numbers are still growing, swelled by 10,000 thrown out by Macedonia. There had been concern for their safety, but the Red Cross said today all the missing had now been located in Albania. ITN's Mark Austin reports from there.
These are the people no one wants, forced at gunpoint from their homes in Kosovo, then kicked out of Macedonia, the country where they were begging for sanctuary but didn't get it. Instead, they were rounded up in the middle of the night, put on buses and dumped across the border with Albania. On this journey of misery, they have now reached Korça in southeast Albania, a town that can't afford to look after them in a country that can't possibly cope. But at least here they are getting some help, local aid workers distributing the meagre food supplies they have. But food, blankets and medicine are scarce. Such is the desperate need of these people that NATO ground troops are on their way to try and ease the plight of the refugees.
The strain on Albania is growing by the day. The poorest country in Europe is now home to more than 300,000 Kosovo refugees. It is a humanitarian catastrophe that NATO didn't plan for, but one which they now have to urgently tackle.
And as if things are not bad enough, reports reaching here tonight say at least another 50,000 refugees are on their way. Mark Austin, ITN, Albania.
There's still grave concern that the thousands trying to flee Kosovo, who were turned back when Yugoslavia closed its borders, could now be used as human shields. Even those now safe in NATO camps in Macedonia are being told they can't stay long. This report is by Tim Ewart.
There is at last some sense of order in the handling of the refugees here. Families are finally being registered, and their dispersal to countries abroad now seems a little less like deportation. Nevertheless, there remains widespread unease over the apparent indifference of the Macedonian authorities. Armed soldiers have been deployed inside NATO-run refugee camps, giving the feeling of forced confinement. And there remain questions about what happened to the thousands herded away from this border camp 2 nights ago. The border is closed, and on the Serb-controlled side, lines of abandoned cars have been left behind by people apparently ordered to go back home. Serb border guards were not welcoming visitors. The Macedonians have been alarmed by this sudden influx of refugees. They worry about the pressures on their struggling economy and, more importantly, about the ethnic balance in a country where there is already a sizable Albanian minority. In this camp, British soldiers are distributing food, taking on the sort of duties that Macedonia has always argued should be NATO's responsibility. And it wants the camps to be cleared as soon as possible. If the Kosovar Albanians are to be welcomed anywhere, it will not be here. Tim Ewart, ITN, Macedonia.
The war in Kosovo has reduced much of the provincial capital Pristina to ruins. Our correspondent Julian Mannion was taken there yesterday, and here's his full report, which has been monitored by Serbian security officials.
It was the first time that the authorities have allowed us into Pristina since the NATO campaign began. It was a brief visit that allowed just a glimpse of the terrible events of the last 2 weeks. On Tuesday night, the centre of the city was blasted by a powerful NATO airstrike. Bombs ploughed through the roof of the central post office, causing part of the building to collapse and cutting most telephone services. Local government buildings were also heavily damaged, and nearby an area of civilian housing was wrecked. We found what looked like 2 large bomb craters among the smashed homes, and Serb officials say that at least 10 people died here. This is what the Serbian authorities wanted us to see: heavy bomb damage in the centre of Pristina. To get here, we had to drive through a once bustling Albanian district of the city, which I remember well from previous visits. Today, it is virtually deserted. On the outskirts of Pristina, we were shown a vast fresh crater in the middle of a cemetery, apparently caused by a bomb that missed an army barracks 100 yards away. Just how much damage has been inflicted on the Yugoslav army is unknown, but the troops we saw and were unable to film are well dispersed and seem to be preparing for a long campaign. Julian Mannion, ITN, Pristina.
NATO today denied that it was responsible for all that damage and claimed it had been orchestrated by Serbian forces. It's still intensifying its bombing and said it now considered Serb TV and radio a legitimate target. Robert Moore reports.
As the American Defence Secretary William Cohen toured the main NATO airbase in Italy, it is becoming clear the West is bracing itself for the long haul in its air war against Yugoslavia. Already into week 3, and the Americans will soon be adding to the air power available to NATO commanders. And the rhetoric against Belgrade is being stepped up.
Mr. Milosevic, as you all have seen, has carried all of us into the heart of darkness. He and his hooded thugs are going through and destroying the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. They are engaging in rape, pillage, and mass murder on a scale that we have not seen since the end of World War II.
NATO has released cockpit video showing strikes on military targets, like this ammunition dump.
The bombs coming in now.
As well as on an armoured vehicle. Next on the target list will be Serb television and radio stations, to counter what some NATO officials are calling the dangerous tools warping Serb opinion. NATO has also announced that next week a further 8,000 soldiers, including some British troops, will be sent to Albania to help with the humanitarian relief effort. So, despite official denials they will have a combat role, the number of Western soldiers in the Balkans is now rapidly mounting. Robert Moore, ITN, at the Ministry of Defence.
The RAF detachment at this airbase numbers 305, most of whom haven't seen family in weeks. Staff work round the clock. Kosovo is just a 35-minute flight away.
The pressure's there, definitely, from the aircrew downwards, and it is hard for everybody, yes.
The pilots here are no strangers to Serbian airspace. Traditionally, Joia del Colle is used by the RAF to patrol Bosnian no-fly zones. Now the stakes are much higher. The pilots fly bombing missions over Kosovo day and night, and no one relaxes till they're all safely back on base. The pilots returning to this airbase now face several hours of intensive debriefing. Every move, every problem, every successful bomb drop will be analysed in depth so that lessons can be learned for their next sortie. The pilots can't be identified for security reasons, but for some, this is their first combat experience.
Professionally, yeah, there's a huge level of or feeling of achievement there because you have managed your mission. You know, it's what we're paid to go and do, and we've done it.
But in quieter moments, thoughts turn to home and family.
I've got two little ones at home, and it's very hard on the sort of the people left behind. This is what we do day after day at home anyway. Okay, we're working slightly longer hours and we're away from home, but for the families, it is quite difficult being away from us.
No one knows how long they'll be here, but they do know their performance could be crucial to the outcome of this conflict. Shuli Ghosh, ITN, Joia del Colle.
Warfare through the ages, on show behind the glass cases of the Imperial War Museum. NATO would like the conflict in Yugoslavia to be dominated by entirely different high-tech images. Pictures that speak of a new, very modern, lower-risk form of warfare. But some sort of more old-fashioned ground war now looks possible. And politicians must decide if the public has the appetite for that. It could come down to a battle of the images. Will these pictures generate enough sympathy for British public opinion to risk British ground forces? Polls suggest the UK public was evenly split at the outset of war, but that after watching images of the clearing of Kosovo, about 2/3 might now support ground troops being deployed.
Why have we got an army if we're not prepared to go forward? It's always people like us that come off worst, not the people like Milosevic.
Do you think ground troops should be sent in?
I think eventually, yes.
You say that with a particular heavy heart because you assume there'll be more dead bodies if there are ground forces?
Yes, a lot more bloodshed.
This week, The Sun tried to tap a deep public unease about committing ground troops. It asked its readers to phone in and back the campaign. It then quietly buried the poll result, 2-1 in favour of ground troops.
The images from the borders of Macedonia and Albania have forced the alliance's hand. It's forced it to intensify its campaign, to take, in some ways, more risks, because public opinion is reacting not so much against the operation, but not doing enough. And indeed, public opinion may be ahead on the question of ground forces, ahead of the government.
But it's United States opinion that's in the driving seat, and President Clinton thinks Americans are still haunted by images of Vietnam. US polls certainly suggested very little support for a troop commitment at the outset of war, but the trend is up. Some polls say more than half Americans would support President Clinton sending in troops.
If pictures come out like they have been, where you see people obviously in great suffering, I think he will be able to at least convince the majority of people that it would be necessary to send ground troops.
US pollsters are asking some other questions. Results suggest 52% of Americans think Kosovo's not worth losing American soldiers over. 63% say it's definitely not worth losing 100 American soldiers for.
There'd be too many people getting killed in it, and then there would be the problem with families, their sons dying for something. Well, that doesn't pertain to us. You know, why are we there?
A lot of work would have to be done to prepare the public for the ground force war the politicians promised wouldn't happen. But the next time the Prime Minister addresses the nation, he may be rallying the home front.
I want them to go with the whole country, united behind them.
These remote border passes are home to thousands of Kosovan men training for war. They were driven from their homes in tractors, and they plan to go back with guns. We've just been stopped by armed guards up at that pass. They've told us they don't want us using TV cameras. We're now going to try and find one of their recruitment centres.
Just 10 kilometres from the border, we find a KLA camp. The Kosovo Liberation Army plan to go where NATO only flies. back into Serbia for war. Day by day, new recruits line up for the cause. As we approached the camp with a hidden camera, we wanted to ask what they plan to do with the estimated 45,000 troops. Battle with the Serbian units who drove them out, or unleash revenge on Serb villages.
No film here. No film here. You can't film here, and you have to go out right here.
Okay. NATO is considering arming these soldiers. Here, they politely refuse to tell us where their guns come from. But guns there are. We witnessed new recruits learning to use them.
Well, they've told us in no uncertain terms that we cannot film, and we are now getting out. But remember, we are actually on Albanian soil, so this is a very sensitive base camp.
Back in the border town of Kukes, we were refused an interview with the Albanian army, and here is perhaps why. On the outskirts, a disused factory, now producing new recruits for the KLA. Their high command has ordered a general mobilization for all Kosovan men aged between 18 and 50. Families gather at the gates to say goodbye, and you don't have to travel far to find out why they let them go. From homeowners to tent people, enter here and you'll begin to understand.
Surely these children need a father. They are now risking more men dying.
In tent 662, 3 fathers are absent. All joined the KLA, 2 fight on, 1 already killed in combat. His mother says he spent his life for Kosovo. I'm proud. A wife without a husband, a son without a father, because a people are without a home. Hidden in these valleys lies their hope. Mark Jordan, Albania, 5 News.
American Air Force helicopters flying close to the border with Kosovo. They're here to deliver aid to newly arrived refugees and to take out the injured and the sick. It is a humanitarian mission, but it may soon become something very different. From today, NATO is taking control of all military operations in Albania, and after several incidents of Serbs shelling across the border, things are increasingly tense here. And NATO's bombing of Kosovo is intensifying. We watched as jets streaked across the distant sky. They could be seen diving towards targets in Kosovo. So we drove further towards the border to a hilltop vantage point just inside Kosovo. From there we looked down on the town of Jakova, the apparent target of NATO's bombers. There seem to have been hits on the town centre and more on the outskirts, where, according to a Kosovo Liberation Army man accompanying us, Serb units are positioned.
A police station being hit and a telecom building in the city itself. And
that's the police station being hit, you think?
Yeah, I think that.
It is impossible to say exactly what is happening inside Jakova. The Serbs won't allow journalists into Kosovo, but most ethnic Albanians have been forced from the town, a town the KLA want back.
We control 40% of the territory in Kosovo.
You still control?
Yeah, we still do. And we are going to increase that.
It is in this town of Jakova, right below us, that some of the worst ethnic cleansing was perpetrated by the Serbs. Now it seems it is the target of NATO bombing. But refugees from Jakova tell us bombing simply isn't enough. We're glad about the airstrike, says this man, but what we really want are NATO ground troops. Close to the border we found these children who lost their parents in the exodus from Jakova. Brought out by neighbours, now, a week later, they've still no news about their mother and father. As we left the border, we passed several truckloads of KLA soldiers heading for Kosovo. They are volunteers or refugees turned recruits, men expelled from a homeland they believe to be theirs. Mark Austin, ITN, on the Kosovo-Albanian border.
At a place called Belgrade in Macedonia, the rows of tents seem to go on forever. This one camp is now home to 30,000 refugees. just part of the 125,000 believed to be in the country. The latest pitiful group appeared on the border with Kosovo today, trying to walk along a railway line. Macedonian policemen sent them back to a checkpoint, and soon afterwards the first family was allowed across. They're joining relatives in Macedonia and leaving behind the terrors of Kosovo.
They came to house and said, if we come, you have to leave the house. If we come again, we're going to kill you. Oh.
Did you see them killing anybody?
I haven't seen, but we have heard that a lot of people are dead, you know, killing, I don't know.
And are there a lot of people hiding? We've had reports that many thousands of people are hiding.
Tens of thousands hiding in the mountains, through the house to house, you know, running through the night.
And on the ground, British armour put on display as a reminder that NATO troops are still waiting to carry out the role they were sent here for. These soldiers can't talk politics, but there is a growing feeling of impatience. The troops were sent here to be part of a peacekeeping force in Kosovo, and they're now anxious to get on with the job. Many of the soldiers have been helping to care for refugees. It's had a powerful impact.
With having a young family of my own, it really gets to the heart when you see such young children.
It was quite shocking to see 3 generations of one family in one 10-man tent, with literally all they had with them was the clothes they were wearing.
But not all the refugee families are together. On a wall at Brajda, there are scores of messages from people desperate to trace loved ones now missing. The camp will be home for today's new arrivals until someone decides they must move on again. Tim Ewart, ITN, Macedonia.
Well, what we are certainly demanding is acceptance of our objectives, and the bottom line of those objectives is that the refugees must be allowed to return and must have an international military presence in Kosovo to give them the security to return. Anything less would reward President Milosevic for the brutal ethnic cleansing we've witnessed over the past 2 weeks. And what he should understand from today's meeting is that the NATO alliance is strong in its resolve to secure those objectives. Everybody who spoke supported them. He has failed in his objective of trying to split the alliance or divide partners off from it. We have the resolve to finish the job, and we've got the unity to keep going as long as it takes, and we can keep going longer than President Milosevic.
In the USA and in Britain, there is increasing public support for ground forces to go in to fight their way in if necessary. Do you respond to that?
We had a very frank and open discussion about this at the working lunch today. And we are all clear that we have no intention of sending in an armed invasion. We have no plans to send in an armed invasion. There has been no change in our position on that. And I do think people should understand that ground troops are not a shortcut. It would take 2 or 3 months to have in the theatre the kind of large-scale expeditionary force that we needed to fight its way in. We can't wait 2 or 3 months. It was the best way in which you can have a direct and immediate effect on the balance of forces in Kosovo is by intensifying the air campaign as we're doing at present.
You might have to wait 2 or 3 months. It might take that much time.
We are prepared to put the time and the effort in to secure our objectives. But as I said, ground troops are not a miracle cure, and they're not a shortcut.
And what's the vision now? A protectorate, an international protected area?
We were always committed to providing protection for the Kosovars. That is why we demanded as part of the Rhombui process that there should be that international presence to guarantee the ceasefire, to safeguard the people, whatever their ethnic identity of Kosovo. And we want to make sure that protection force goes in. And having done so, then we can refine the future political constitution of Kosovo. But it is quite clear it must be one which keeps the internal security in their hands and keeps them free from repression from Belgrade.
And makes no reference to Belgrade. Belgrade really isn't going to have any kind of say in it.
In the Rhombui Peace Accords...
Which is now completely overtaken
No, it's
by
not completely overtaken. Indeed, as I said, the Kosovo Albanians themselves stand by those peace accords. The people who never signed it, the people who never accepted it, was Belgrade. And I think the penny's beginning to drop in Belgrade that it might actually have been better if they had accepted the negotiated settlement we offered them. We tried very hard through dialogue. The military conflict only commenced when it was clear that President Milosevic only understood the threat of force, and he himself, at the very time when he's pretending to talk peace, had been planning the spring offensive.
European leaders are meeting now in Brussels to discuss the next diplomatic moves in the crisis. They've been joined by the United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, but there's little sign of anyone calling for an immediate halt to the bombing campaign. Robert Moore reports.
This emergency European summit coincides with the start of the 4th week of bombing, and for the first time there is now a sense of diplomatic and military action running in parallel. The German Chancellor Gerhard Schröder has floated a peace plan that would suspend the air war for 24 hours to allow the Serb forces to withdraw from Kosovo. But other leaders expressed only limited interest, although the arrival of the UN Secretary General has added to the diplomatic options. But while meeting the Prime Minister, Mr. Annan was expressing extreme caution about when and how to intervene.
One has to handle the situation very, very carefully. It's delicate. It's not something you jump in or rush in. There's lots of discussions going on. There has to be a sign of serious desire to engage. There has to be a sense of timing and all that. So I have no plans to go to Belgrade at the moment.
But Mr. Blair insisted there was no scope for a compromise.
The policy of ethnic cleansing has to be defeated, seen to be defeated. What Milosevic has done to those people in Kosovo is an evil act, it's a barbarous act, and it's got to be reversed and defeated in entirety.
With Downing Street describing the German plan merely as a point of discussion and NATO calling it food for thought, it's clear diplomacy has a long way to go. But with the UN re-entering the picture, at least the shape of a possible diplomatic settlement is beginning to emerge. Robert Moore, ITN, Downing Street.
The first British government aid convoy bound for Albania left Stansted Airport today. The convoy is being sent with 7 specially trained drivers. Trucks, Land Rovers and other equipment weighing 90 tons were loaded onto an Antonov cargo plane for the first leg of the journey. The vehicles will help deliver aid to the Kosovo refugees. Albania's armed forces were ordered today to take all necessary steps to resist cross-border attacks by Serb forces. The Albanian government says it doesn't want to be drawn into a wider conflict, but promised to defend its territory. The Serbs are targeting members of the Kosovo Liberation Army, which are operating along the border. Our correspondent Mark Austin has been with one of those KLA units and sent us this report.
On the border between Albania and Kosovo, the shelling continues and it is becoming increasingly tense. We came across these Kosovo Liberation Army fighters trying to pinpoint Serb gunners in the mountains. International monitors say Serb commandos crossed into Albania and shelled a nearby border village, a stronghold of the KLA. One mortar round badly damaged the local school, though no one was inside at the time. The KLA soldiers here say the Serbs have fired more than 20 mortars into this area from the mountains up there just after dawn this morning. They say it's a clear attempt by the Serbs to bring Albania itself into this war. It is the second Serb incursion in 48 hours. Further up the border, they briefly held, then destroyed one village. That is also the fear here. Families continue to flee the border area. But the KLA unit we met remains defiant. Among them, women fighters, including this 18-year-old former student who's given up her studies and picked up a Kalashnikov for the cause of Kosovo. Are you prepared to go into Kosovo? Are you prepared to die for Kosovo?
Yes, for Kosovo and for my place. Yes, I will die for that place. And all of them.
Do you think you will win Kosovo back from the Serbs?
We will win. I know that. We know we will win. And when, we don't know that, but we will win.
But at the moment, the Serbs are trying to keep them out of Kosovo, cut off their supply routes. And all the while, the risk is of a wider war. Mark Austin, ITN, on the Kosovo-Albanian border.
Angels of mercy is how many refugees see the British troops who've built them shelter. But the men trained as warriors, and that is what they must now turn to.
We're not getting soft, but it's time, I think, that we should hand over to the NGOs. That's their business. And then we can get on and be tasked to whatever task is next.
As the British troops pack up and move out of these refugee camps, it's left many people wondering why Tony Blair has now sent 1,800 extra troops to join them. Some Macedonians think they know why and don't like it one little bit.
Straight after that announcement, Serb supporters gathered last night in the Macedonian capital to protest. They think the ground war will be launched from here, and they want none of it.
I will tell your soldiers to go home, and I would like to ask your soldiers, do they know why they are coming here?
You don't want them in this country?
Well, as guests, yeah, but as troops, no.
What would your message be to Tony Blair, who claims he's doing this for freedom and human rights and everything? Sorry, just this man.
Okay. I would like Tony Blair to come one day in Belgrade and to stay with the children and the people that are going to basements and to this hiding place only for one night.
Those voices come as no surprise to the British troops already positioned along the border here in Macedonia.
On these roads, Army Land Rovers have been repeatedly attacked by stone-throwing mobs. Windscreens have been smashed and they are under orders to wear flak jackets and helmets. This is the front line. Ahead of them, just across this border, Serbian forces, but behind them, a fragile young democracy divided. In Macedonia, the British are foe to some, friends to others. So this is allowing you to look into Serbia?
Yeah.
Hidden away on the border, they watch Serb military movements and measure NATO bomb damage. The other half of the regiment are now on their way from Britain. Together, they'll await orders.
Whatever they decide, whatever negotiations take place, we're ready to enact whatever task is given to us.
So for now, they watch the border, but they can only guess whether or not they will ever cross it. Mark Jordan with the British forces at the border, 5 News.
The events of 24 hours ago will remain with them forever. First, they had to leave their homes. Then, just as they thought it could get no worse, they are attacked by warplanes. Still in shock, they wanted to tell what happened to them, young and old alike. How a low-flying jet attacked them 3 times, hit both sides of the road, and then the first 3 trailers in their convoy. The white tents of the refugee camp give an illusion of serenity. But inside one tent, one family, and unimaginable anguish. The Barami family had been in the trailer of the 3rd tractor. When they set off, there had been 25 of them. Now they are just 16. 2 are dead, 7 are injured and still in Kosovo. Resha Barami cradles her 5-year-old grandson. His father is dead. The first tractor was hit by the plane and people were burned, she said. The boy's father died instantly. In the second tractor, one of my other sons was badly injured and lost an arm. She said she did not know whether the low-flying jet was a NATO plane or a Serb one. They just ran away, she said, leaving the dead and wounded. This man, however, was convinced he'd seen a Serb jet, saying he saw it with his own eyes. Another survivor made similar claims, and that the refugees had been shot by Serb police.
Only one airplane who came around us, and this airplane has been Serbian airplanes, but the police, they laughed with us and say, NATO's airplanes. And they began, and the police to shoot on us.
It's impossible to verify such claims. After all, many refugees would want to see the Serbs blamed. Even when told by Channel 4 News that NATO had admitted it had accidentally attacked some civilians, here they said they did not believe it. As they struggled just to come to terms with the enormity of what's happened, others said if NATO was responsible for the attack which killed and injured these people's relatives, the bombing should continue. But the claims and counter-claims of the propaganda war are lost on a 12-year-old boy who's just lost his dad. Specialists in dealing with trauma are now with some of the children, helping them talk about their experiences, sketch out what happened.
Did you see them on the ground or up in the air?
Describing it is one thing, making sense of it another. For whoever is responsible, the feeling of loss is no less.
Kimete has already escaped Kosovo. She now lives in Switzerland, but a ferry is taking her back to her past. She's heading for northern Albania. Most of the ferry's passengers are here because of the war that's already seeped well over Albania's frontier. The boat is the artery of the KLA. On board a suspicious number of young Kosovan males, probably joining up. The fiercest fighting in Kosovo is taking place just across the frontier. What is his job? What is he doing now? He told us I and some friends are engaged in supplying the KLA with some foodstuff. There's a need for food because a lot of young men are joining up. When the ferry docks at Bayram Suri, the KLA is in control. It's here their war is being organised. Passengers are checked, Kosovan males ordered to the front. On the border road, we found the war had come to us. We saw truckloads of KLA soldiers heading for Kosovo. They didn't want us to film them inside Albania. It made no difference. The Yugoslavs were watching anyway. And they were clearly targeting the KLA's vehicles. So, quite unexpectedly, some 12 kilometres inside Albania, we found ourselves on what is now effectively the front line of Kosovo's war. Yeah, that was extremely close. They're aiming for the road. It's dangerous to travel here, even for civilians. We joined a group of border villagers who'd brought horses rather than vehicles to rescue their possessions. By the road, brand new signs warning of mines. We saw dozens of unexploded bomblets from cluster bombs, so large areas of Albania have been turned into minefields. The villagers took us to Kasai, a hamlet right next to the border. It's been heavily shelled.
Bombardimi ka në Topqoshin, kudo këtë është gava së ditës. Ato shqiptarëve të tjera kanë rënë këtu.
The bomb has fallen at that corner.
There's no sign of the army, so they've taken up guns themselves.
Të momente, më këto armë I kem gatshme për vetëmbrojtje nga ushtria.
The villagers here are preparing to fight the Serbs inside their own country. The Serb positions are just behind me, and for the last couple of days running, the village just down the road has actually been invaded briefly by Serb forces. Endless processions of women and children taking their animals with them and leaving the district of Tropoja. That's part of the reason for the shelling, to goad Albania into war. The handful of people left behind spend half their lives in bunkers now, as more and more NATO troops flood into Albania, offering succour to the Kosovan refugees. The Albanians themselves wonder why no NATO soldiers are here helping them, and if they don't come soon, how long it will be before Albania feels obliged to enter the fray. Syra Shah, Channel 4 News, Northern Albania. last refugee crosses a border that's supposed to be closed. Come and help him, says a Yugoslav border guard. But the two countries have just severed relations. Albanian police don't dare approach. There's an agony of waiting. It's left to a French medical team to break through. The man is rescued for now, but he's just one of many thousands needing help. A little way down the hill, the Alio family crossed the border an hour before. Mother, father, grandmother and 10 children have been walking for 2.5 days.
They told us we have 3 hours to leave our houses, or they would burn us inside. There is no place for you. Go to Albania.
Because they've got a vehicle of sorts, Albanian authorities encourage them to keep moving deep into the country. In practice, they've been left to fend for themselves. They've had no food or advice where to go, so they're trying to find the rest of their village. Do you know where are people from Gudjan? We're neighbours. They're at the mosque. Mirza, Nedzi, all of them, they're at the mosque. It's their best lead yet, so they set off. At about the same time, help is at hand for the man we saw at the border. He's at an Italian military medical camp. His name is Jalaluddin Hazari, but he's lost his relatives. He has a lung infection. There's pressure to discharge him, but without family to look after him, doctors think he'll die.
I think that is better for him. I have a bed in a tent.
An Albanian doctor's been called in. The authorities here are under political pressure from NATO countries to say they can cope with the refugees, but they're struggling. And there's nobody to blow the whistle. UNHCR can't afford to upset its donors by criticising.
For me, it's not a problem. I'm here to work. But when I go away, my nation go away, the person that are under a tent, what to do? They die.
Refugees like the Alios aren't even offered a tent. They've pinned their hopes on the mosque, where they think they'll find their neighbours. But when they reach it, there's disappointment. What the hell is happening? They've already left. They're offered a bed for the night by a local. Bring your children, or else they'll die. We can't come. Let them die. She says we're going to die here. We're staying. He's frightened to trust the man. They've been told the mafia preys on refugees. We'll take all your children. We're Albanians. All of you come. Get in the cart. How could you spend the whole night here? Most refugees eventually find shelter with Albanian families, but the country's saturated. The UNHCR gives the government food for host families. They don't always get it.
I have 43 people in my house. Yeah.
Wow. Is he paying for them all?
Yes.
Does he get money from the government for that? But the family won't be persuaded. They've been through too much to risk more danger. Ordinary stories picked at random on an average day. Their misery illustrates an aid network that is quite simply failing them. Syra Shah, Channel 4 News, Kukes.
Nearly 4 weeks into the air war, and as the Prime Minister toured Allied headquarters in Brussels, there are mounting allegations that Kosovo is the scene not just of expulsions, but of widespread murder and atrocities. By secure video link, Mr. Blair spoke to NATO's top commanders.
Command video teleconference system for Allied Command Europe.
Mr. Blair told them the war may not be about defending anyone's sovereignty, but it is about morality.
We have all watched, everyone, right round the world, these people driven at the point of a gun from their homes, the men murdered, the women raped, families dispossessed of everything they have, and I believe we are fighting for the values of civilization here.
Amid the atrocity allegations, the NATO spokesman has today claimed that at least 3,500 people have been executed, that 100 women are still being held captive and raped at 2 factories in Kosovo. It's also alleged that 700 men were made to stand as human shields in front of Serb tanks, and that ethnic Albanian teenage boys are being used to supply blood banks to help Serb war casualties. The Foreign Secretary made clear that Britain would now hand over secret material to the War Crimes Tribunal to help it pursue its investigations.
It is a rare step to release intelligence material. We have taken it because we are determined that those responsible for turning Kosovo into a slaughterhouse should be brought to justice. We have collated material on more than 50 separate incidents over the past month.
And the tribunal's chief prosecutor said President Milosevic was a key target of her probe.
Not only do I have no hesitation, but I believe that the mandate of the tribunal is, in fact, to scrutinize personal criminal liability for war crimes at the highest level. I believe that's why we were created, and not merely to bring to account low-key perpetrators.
Some of the secret material provided to the tribunal is likely to be signals intelligence, probably gathered at GCHQ based on intercepting Yugoslav military communications. So in the coming weeks, highly classified intelligence will be handed over to the War Crimes Tribunal. It's designed to ensure that justice catches up not just with those who commit the crimes, but also those, as NATO puts it, responsible for creating the killing fields of Kosovo. Robert Moore, ITN, at the Foreign Office.
This event marked the 20th anniversary of Lady Thatcher becoming Prime Minister, and true to form, she used it to attack NATO's reluctance to send ground troops to Kosovo.
We must be prepared to cope with all the changing demands of war, including, if that is what is required, the deployment of ground troops. And we must expect a long haul until the job is done.
This is a war that must be won, she said, and called Mr. Milosevic the butcher of Belgrade.
Milosevic's regime and the genocidal ideology that sustains it represents something altogether different, a truly monstrous evil, one which cannot with safety be merely checked or contained, one which must be totally defeated and be seen by the Serbs themselves to be defeated.
Lady Thatcher's speech, which will be heard far beyond Westminster, adds a powerful voice to the growing numbers of people urging Western leaders to commit ground forces in Kosovo. Jo Andrews, ITN, Westminster.
The official line always when Tony Blair's people arrive in Washington is that this Prime Minister and this President are absolutely on the same page. Truth be told, this time Mr. Blair believes a little arm twisting's in order. Overnight, first at the White House, then this morning on Capitol Hill, where half the Senate, no less, gathered for a closed-door session. Mr. Blair's message carefully synchronised with the NATO Secretary General's.
Prime Minister, what sort of response are you getting on ground troops?
What is essential this week at this NATO alliance, when we celebrate our anniversary, is that we give the clearest possible message of will and resolution that Milosevic and his policy shall not prevail.
That means ground troops, doesn't it, sir?
It means we carry on with the campaign that we have launched, that we make sure that that campaign is intensified and successful.
What Messrs Blair, Chirac and Solana diagnose is that it's now or never on a plan for ground troops, as virtually every senior member of every NATO government comes to town.
I think it is inappropriate to rule anything out, and we have not done so.
Mr. Clinton's disciples may be telling their British counterparts today, no decision yet, but go behind closed doors with people like US Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, and you'll hear them quietly harangued for the failure of the Clinton campaign so far.
I think we are at war, and we can dance around the technicalities and the niceties of it, Madam Secretary, but we are at war.
Indeed, Capitol Hill's foreign policy heavyweights applaud the Europeans for leading the way now on a ground force.
Because it appears that two different wars are being fought.
Ground force is inevitable for NATO leaders?
I'm not certain how it could be done without ground forces, and this is why there has to be a consensus on the proper planning and preparation, and likewise participation.
A role for the Russians? But surely that's up for grabs this weekend, isn't it?
Well, I think a very big role for the Russians, and I think my hope would be that the Russians will play a very significant effort.
So there's a serious prospect of this NATO summit emerging with a decidedly mixed, albeit very Clinton-esque message. A plan to prepare for ground troops may be, as well as the ultimate Cold War alliance asking the Russians, no less, who pointedly are having nothing to do with this party-turned-wake, for them to carry on talking to Milosevic.
Slightly ironic, isn't it, that the NATO alliance should be looking at the Russians as the best hope of a negotiating way out of it?
The world is different today, and if Russia can play a part on the world stage of helping bring it to conclusion, my attitude is fine. And that would, maybe it would be ironic, but it would be a valuable service to mankind. Thank you all.
My name is Silvia Zemi. I came from Mitrovica. I am married. I have 2 children. One boy is 2 years old. He is with my husband. We left Mitrovica because the Serbian police had came at our house. They push us with machines, guns. They are wearing a mask, a black mask. They are so tall and so terrible. The police stop us and they smile with us. They say us goodbye and never get back here. So we walked 55 kilometers. I couldn't walk anymore because my baby was too hard and I can't carry. So I must drop in a lorry. We separated with my husband. Ibrahim? A nie widzisz brata? An, proszę, inaczej szybko. I asked my friends for my family, but he says that he don't know nothing. He haven't seen nobody there of my family. Here are the names of family which are arrived with a tractor, with cars. I looked this list for my family, but I can't find the name of them. So I start to look after them. There is another place of that list. We must go in the center of the cooks to look after the names of my family. I asked them, but they told me that it started 2 o'clock. Now it's 10 to 2, I must wait 10 minutes. Fala, është këtu qendra për regjistrim? Lista ta ka ndonjë listë këtu? The place is very, very nice. Just to go in holidays. But how I am coming here for me is terrible. But këtu registrimi I emrave? Wait till the man come back here. Maybe 10 minutes or I don't know how. I think that I saw people like they also are worried about someone, about their family. And whenever I saw peoples, I think that maybe here is my husband. Maybe that boy must be my son.
I can take your name and everything for a radio message if you want.
Yes,
that
I would.
means that your name will be
Okay, she will help me. You have to write who am I looking for?
No, because this is not. This is only at the radio to say Selviye Azemi with 3 people of her family origin Mitrovica are in Phuket. We are not able for the moment to ask to trace persons.
The Milosevic wants to separate us, to kill us, and his people must be killed. But I don't know if he will understand this.
At the TV headquarters, there was terrible damage. The missile smashed into the heart of the complex, which NATO regards as a key prop of President Milosevic's regime. In a split second, the station's main control room and other technical areas were completely destroyed, with staff killed and injured by the explosion and the building's collapse. According to Serb officials, the bodies of 10 people have so far been found in the wreckage. Another 18 people are said to be in hospital. Throughout the day, the emergency services have continued their search for victims and possible survivors. NATO says that the TV station was the hub of Serbia's war propaganda. But for the stunned and angry TV employees, it was simply their place of work at a time when any job is precious. NATO thought about this attack long and hard before striking at what it believed was a bastion of the Milosevic regime. But the human cost has been tragically high, and the question is whether the success in damaging the Serbian propaganda machine outweighs the sad spectacle that we are witnessing here.
Serbia's got no chance. Well, Milosevic has got no chance at all. Nowhere near. He's playing with the wrong people, basically.
It's what I joined for. It's what we trained for, so why not send us, really?
Will I be fighting? Kosovo, yeah? It's only natural. I think every squad will be fighting. You don't know what you're going into, do you?
Those of us who commit other women's sons to fight on our behalf must be very clear that we are not doing it in the wrong way, in the wrong terms, and at the wrong time.
There's rumours going about we might go in 3 weeks' time, we might never go. Like other guys are away, some of my mates gone already. So I keep on saying to Lisa, my girlfriend, if we do go, then, like she said to me last week, oh, are you on call for Kosovo? And I went, I'm not on call for Kosovo, but we might go. You don't know in the army until you might get told 12 hours before you go.
The waiting was the worst part because you didn't know one way or the other when you were going to go. You were maybe given a time, or an estimated time, and you'd sit and you'd wait, and you'd go home for work, and all the time you're waiting for a knock at the door, and you were sitting waiting, and then you got to bed at night, and the slightest noise, any vehicles coming up the road, you were awake, so you never really slept.
I think I'd not enjoy it, but I would look forward to it as it's what I joined for, it's what we trained for, and it's something everyone in the army would like to do, I think.
In my judgment, there is no going back now. I believe that within a very few weeks now there will be a substantial force of troops on the ground in Kosovo.
I joined the army to fight for my queen and country, so I'd fight against them, obviously. I wouldn't really want to, but that's what I'm paid for. That's why I joined up. I think the only resolved way is to everyone get around the table and talk about it.
You know, it sounds a bit grim, but you've got to write your last will and testament, and that's when you realise that is it. Once that's written and the envelope's sealed up, that's your last will and testament, and you hope to come back, to be able to come back take it out of the safe and rip it up and throw it in the bin.
A House of Commons which will have the responsibility not only of deciding the cost of those wars, but the cost in human lives, must think very carefully before it allows that to go ahead.
I've been with my girlfriend now 2 years, and no, she's definitely worried, yeah. Oh yeah, she will be. But everybody's worried. Even my mother might be worried. She keeps on asking me when I phone her, oh, will you go out to Kosovo? No one knows.
My thoughts are with them, it's with their families, as is the whole of the nation. The nation's behind them. And we wish them a safe journey and wish them, a safe return as well. And that they come back.
Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you soon. Good night.
Refugees from Kosovo reaching Albania today have been reporting some of the worst Serb atrocities since the war began. They're telling of systematic rape and murder, with possibly hundreds of men shot in cold blood in the fields. Here's ITN's Bill Neely.
They came in their thousands today, and with them, more horror. From Jakovica in southern Kosovo, more accounts of killing and rape.
Many people are killed there, women.
By the Serb police?
Yes, by the Serb police.
Moza Bitsarai says the police took away many of the town's young girls to their camp. This teenager spoke in detail of killings he'd seen.
What did you see? I see killed children, killed men. They've been with his families, and they take from families and execute.
Executed the men?
Yes.
How many dead men did you see?
I see 10 men.
Yesterday morning, Serb paramilitaries ordered Bekray Kamberi's husband to let go of his 6-year-old son. The men said to him, "We're going to kill you." And they took my husband. I heard gunfire and was forced to run. So many could not tell their stories, but 3 people told me of a group of men taken at gunpoint by Serb police into a house, which was then set on fire. We cannot confirm the truth of these stories, but UN representatives say they are all remarkably consistent. They believe up to 200 people have been killed in Jakovica. Each new wave here today has brought fresh evidence of crimes against humanity, but also further proof that after intensive aerial bombing lasting 5 weeks, NATO is unable to stop groups of Serbs with guns and knives committing mass murder. The survivors left, leaving Jakovica and their country behind, and leaving the world to digest more horror from a hidden land. Bill Neely, ITN, on the Kosovo-Albanian border.
NATO today admitted and apologised for hitting houses in the southern Serbian town of Sedelica with bombs which went astray. Local officials said 20 people, including children, were killed. Our correspondent, Julian Mannion, was taken to the scene by the Serb authorities and they monitored his report.
It was down here in what used to be the basement of a house that 6 children are said to have died. NATO apparently regards these mistakes as an unavoidable part of an air campaign that is generally hitting its chosen targets. The word regrettable is used, but the truth is that tragedy has once again struck a small Serbian community whose people play absolutely no part in shaping the decisions of their government.
More than 10,000 refugees reached Albania today, among them witnesses to one NATO attack, a single plane striking just after 11 this morning, destroying army munitions and Albanian homes.
Yes, there are many killed and many died.
How many?
I don't know, 20 or 30.
This man says lorry loads of munitions were in a garden. NATO tried to bomb the lorries. The witnesses say the incident happened in their village north of Suvareka. NATO says it knows of no such incident. But this old man is one of 2 tractor loads of villagers confirming the attack. Do people in Prizren feel there has been enough NATO bombing?
No, absolutely. We want more.
Even, they say, at the cost of their own homes. Bill Neely, ITN, on the Albanian border.
They may not know much about the British Prime Minister, but they know his name and they know he's on their side. No indication here that Kosovo's sad people blame NATO for their plight. This visit from a senior alliance leader was uplifting for those who lost their country and live a life as uncertain as their past, but less fearful. And while there's no one here who can say with clear authority that tomorrow will be different, here came a political leader who promised that one day they would be going home.
We will do whatever we can to make sure that these people, innocent people, who have been driven from their homes at the point of a gun, are allowed by the world community, acting together, back to their homeland, back to Kosovo, back into their towns and their villages.
For a while there will be more tents and more people to fill them, and their lives will depend on charity, and their hopes will depend on the fulfilment of the promise to defeat the evil that put them here. Time favours no one. In a few months it'll be too late for these refugees to be returned to their homes in Kosovo before the Balkan winter sets in. That would mean they will be here next year. No one wants that, not NATO, not the refugees, and especially not the Macedonians. The Prime Minister also met soldiers from the two British battle groups based in Macedonia. He thanked them for their humanitarian work and apologised to them for being in what he called circumstances they can't be sure of. He told the troops that NATO's demands would be met. We will do whatever is necessary, he said.
We are determined to succeed. You are our means of succeeding. And we honour you and we thank you for the work that you are doing.
On the border, where Serb snipers are unpredictable, Mr. Blair saw some of the 6,000 refugees who crossed over today. Just a few metres away, President Milosevic's army and police were continuing their cleansing. The Prime Minister and his fellow alliance leaders must now hope that NATO's Kosovo solution is achieved first. Colin Baker, ITN, on the Macedonia-Kosovo border.
After Tony Blair's visit to the Balkans yesterday, the government today dramatically stepped up its help for the refugees from Kosovo. Starting later this month, up to 1,000 a week will be arriving in Britain. The Home Secretary Jack Straw said tonight there'll be no upper limit on the number we take. Here's Michael Brunson.
So far, only 330 refugees have come to Britain. Nearly 10,000 have gone to Germany. Until now, the government's been cautious, nervous about public reaction here to another large influx from another country, reluctant to admit by the very fact of taking them in that Milosevic's brutal ethnic cleansing works. But now there's been a change of heart.
The policy itself has not changed. It was agreed with our European Union partners in early April. As far as the United Kingdom is concerned, we've said always that we stand ready to take some thousands of refugees into this country and to respond promptly, as we have done, to requests from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
So far, as the Prime Minister saw, Britain's provided much help at the borders, a policy meant to reinforce the message that the refugees must eventually return home. But here's the problem. NATO keeps on bombing, but the refugees keep on coming. Events have now forced the government's hand. 1,000 refugees a week will come here for several weeks at least, and it's likely to be longer than that for as long as we see those dreadful scenes at the borders. Michael Brunson, ITN, Westminster.
As if to reinforce that government decision, the scenes on Kosovo's borders were dreadful as ever today, with refugees streaming painfully across with stories of Serb brutality. ITN's Bill Neely reports.
Day 42, and still they come. Driven out by the Serbs from the land they've lived in all their lives. The man in the blanket lived in Kosovo for 90 years. It's taken his family 2 weeks to get to the border. His great-grandchildren follow him out. A few days ago, Diona Daka watched the Serb police come for her neighbours, the Hodja family, a music teacher, a physics teacher, their 4 daughters and 1 son.
They be in the home and police come in. And they be in the down bedroom.
Basement. In the basement.
Yes. And they killed nine all family, 9 people.
This woman was told by border guards she had to choose between her 2.5-year-old twins. They'd only let one go across to Albania, the other would stay in Serbia. For hours she pleaded with them. They wanted money. She told them the police had robbed her of everything. A gold necklace was all she had left. Only after 4 hours, did they give her back her twins. These children managed to cross the border. The Serbs sent their parents back to Serbia. The Serbs control the fate and the flow of refugees, turning the tap on and off at will. Whatever NATO does in the air, on the ground, in there, the Serbs are the masters of people's lives. 30,000 people have crossed here in just a few days. Nearly 1 million people have now been forced out of Kosovo. Bill Neely, ITN, on the Kosovo-Albanian border.
A very subtle shift here in the past 24 hours as the President heads for Europe tonight. Way too early to talk of Bill Clinton making a deal with Slobodan Milosevic. But is the President for turning? Yes. Just listen to the new Clinton line in the sand.
That under the right circumstances, we would be willing to have a bombing pause.
Compromise is in the air, isn't it?
Well, compromises, I think everyone would like a compromise because it's hard holding these 19 nations together. It's hard holding both parties together. But I don't believe there'll be a compromise that does not result in the withdrawal of all his forces from Kosovo and a safe environment for Kosovars to come back.
So the bombing goes on. Publicly, the Clinton White House expresses lukewarm interest in the Russian peace process. Privately, they talk of finding middle ground via the Russians. And what lies behind the shifting strategy?
Well, certainly a barrage of heavy-duty criticism here on Capitol Hill in the past few days is one factor. Also a change in American public opinion, now against sending ground troops to Kosovo. Bill Clinton and policy, according to his critics, as ever, a movable feast.
And I think there's some deals in the air, but a lot of deals never hit the ground.
The President and compromise, does that worry you?
Well, let's see what he's talking about. But sure, it would worry me. It would worry me that any deal would be construed as something close to defeat.
This kind of negotiation could take months, couldn't it?
It could. It could. As a matter of fact, this kind of negotiation could take a hell of a lot longer than we may. We may very well be faced with ground troops before there's anything close to a compromise.
President Clinton is making his first visit to Europe since the start of the bombing and immediately received a briefing from NATO's political and military leaders, not just on the campaign so far, but also on the tough options that lie ahead. Hours later, he was at an American Air Force base in Germany, the commander-in-chief praising his pilots and explaining why Americans are fighting a war over a small corner of the southern Balkans.
If we want Europe to be undivided and democratic and at peace for the first time in history, and if we don't want your successors to have to come to this continent and fight another bitter war, then we must stand in Kosovo for the elemental principle of the common humanity of every breathing, living person in this continent.
He was later greeting the 3 American soldiers who had been captured by Serb forces before being released.
I'm proud of them.
Mr. Clinton insisted that refugees had the same rights as POWs, to be allowed to go home. But the presidential visit was overshadowed by the first NATO casualties of the war. An Apache helicopter gunship, part of the force training in Albania, crashed, killing both pilots. The KLA separatists are still clinging to pockets of Kosovo against the continuing Serb offensive. But the further encirclement of Yugoslavia by NATO is underway. 24 warplanes, F-18s, are being deployed to Hungary. The first time aircraft will launch strikes from there. Tomorrow, the pace of diplomacy will quicken again when foreign ministers of the major powers gather in Bonn. But after exactly 6 weeks of this war, remarkably, there is no sign of the concessions from Belgrade that would bring about an early end to the bombing. Robert Moore, ITN, at the Foreign Office.
In the last hour, NATO has effectively admitted hitting a market and hospital complex in Niš today in an attack which the Serbs said killed 11 civilians. NATO said its aircraft were using cluster bombs against Niš airfield, but unfortunately it was highly probable that one went astray. ITN's Julian Mannion was taken there by the Serb authorities, and I should warn you, you might find his report distressing.
30 yards from the vegetable market, we found some of the dead, killed by what Serb authorities say were 2 cluster bombs dropped for whatever reason in different parts of the southern city of Niš. Cluster bombs contain a number of different explosive charges and are designed to kill soldiers by spraying shrapnel over a wide area. The marks left by these bombs were similar to cluster bomb damage that I've seen in Chechnya and Vietnam. NATO will have to explain how it was that weapons designed to kill enemy infantry in large numbers came to be dropped into the streets of this Serbian city.
Talks continue today on the new peace plan for Kosovo, which got Russia's endorsement yesterday. As another Western military convoy went into Macedonia, negotiators tried to resolve Yugoslav objections to NATO's involvement in a peacekeeping force. NATO insisted on a leading role for itself.
NATO will be ready. We know our responsibility. We are preparing to assume that responsibility. And that is, by the way, one of the key reasons for a NATO corps. Who else could be ready in such an organised way on time?
There are moments when Ekrem Husseini looks almost like any 11-year-old boy. Almost, but he is not. Last night he arrived at a refugee camp deeply traumatised by a year of war. Ekrem has seen more than his sisters and brothers. He was shelled by Serb police on his way home from school. Months later he saw dismembered bodies in a field. He's been under gunfire, mortar fire, and this week he saw his father beaten with a hammer and dragged away. His mother says the first shelling frightened him. He screamed at night, then began twitching. Then, as she explains his descent into near madness, Ekrem changes. With the constant gunfire, he developed partial deafness, then speech problems. Then he couldn't walk properly. He used to love school and football, says his sister. He was good at everything. It is hard to believe this is the same boy.
He was not mentally handicapped in any way before.
This doctor has never seen a more severe case of shell shock in one so young.
This is the first case, so young and with so grave symptoms of war trauma.
Dr. Prendy says Ekrem will need years of specialist help, and even then, he's not optimistic Ekrem will recover. There are, he says, many children in these camps gravely traumatized by Kosovo's horror. Ekrem's trauma mirrors Kosovo's. For a year and more, a boy and a land have been through hell. The damage, the scars are very real indeed, and there's no guarantee that any outside help or force can return Ekrem or his land to the way they were. Ekrem's home and school were burned by the Serbs. His father, arrested and beaten, is missing. Ekrem is safe now, except from the memories of what he has seen.
Good evening. NATO announced this evening it was reviewing targeting procedures after it admitted bombing China's embassy in Belgrade by mistake. The attack, which is thought to have killed 4 people, threw diplomatic efforts to end the Kosovo conflict into turmoil. China called the strike a crime of war. From Belgrade, Julian Mannion reports.
Around midnight, a series of thunderous explosions shook our hotel, and soon afterwards came the extraordinary news that the Chinese embassy had been hit and was on fire. According to the Chinese, 3 missiles fired from different directions hit the building, which housed both the embassy and residential quarters. NATO's desire to keep up the pressure on President Milosevic appears to have led to another blunder, and this time it's one that could have a political cost. China is a nation with a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, the very body that's about to discuss a possible solution to the crisis in Kosovo. A few hundred yards away, another building was also burning fiercely. This was the Hotel Yugoslavia, believed by NATO to house members of the deadly paramilitary group led by the notorious Arkan. According to NATO, the embassy bombing was a case of pilots misidentifying the building while trying to attack the Federal Directorate for Supply and Procurement. The attack is certain to have serious diplomatic consequences at a crucial stage of the war. Julian Mannion, ITN, Belgrade.
NATO said it deeply regretted the embassy attack, but insisted it wouldn't call a halt to its military campaign. Russia cancelled a planned visit to Britain by Boris Yeltsin's foreign minister just hours before he was due to arrive. And there's been a wave of violent protests in China, as Robert Moore reports.
Within hours of the bombing of their embassy in Belgrade, and hundreds of students took to the streets outside the American embassy in Beijing. It was a protest that appears to have been officially sanctioned. Later, after darkness fell over the Chinese capital, the protests gathered pace. The error by NATO is having immediate diplomatic fallout. Across the Atlantic at NATO's headquarters, the resolve to continue with the bombing was combined with apologies.
Everything is overshadowed, as we expect, as we recognise, by this one very, very bad mistake. But we continue to go after those military power structures which alone can make Milosevic stop the war in Kosovo.
But despite strong Russian condemnation of events, Viktor Chernomyrdin, Moscow's envoy for the Balkan crisis, is continuing with his shuttle diplomacy. He is likely now to head to Belgrade, perhaps seeing an opportunity amid the tragedy. In London and Washington, there is a real sense that despite the blunder, there is no going back. After 6 weeks of bombing, to concede defeat now over Kosovo would be to damage NATO's credibility, quite possibly beyond repair. Robert Moore, ITN, at the Foreign Office. Thousands of Chinese demonstrators spent much of the day gathered outside the British and American embassies in Beijing. The abuse and violence is aimed at the two countries that many in China blame for the destruction of their Yugoslav embassy. British diplomats remain trapped inside their compound, although large numbers of police were also ensuring that events did not escalate out of control. Such street protests, so rare in Beijing, undoubtedly have official sanction. At NATO headquarters in Brussels, the strike on the Chinese embassy was being blamed on disastrous intelligence that led to a blunder with such severe diplomatic consequences.
We have acknowledged where the error occurred, quickly, honestly, in the intelligence gathering process. We have also stated, just as quickly, just as clearly, that the procedures have been reviewed to make it very unlikely that such an error would occur again.
Amid those continuing Russian mediation efforts, Britain is left to deal with the diplomatic fallout of that targeting error. The Foreign Office is now advising against all non-essential travel to China. A precaution, Britain says, but undoubtedly a response to the increasing tensions. Robert Moore, ITN, at the Foreign Office.
The Yugoslav army came out with this statement just a few hours ago, announcing a partial withdrawal of troops from Kosovo. They say it's because they've completed their task of beating the Kosovo Liberation Army. Others say there could be another military reason, that they fear NATO attacks. But there's also a diplomatic message here. President Slobodan Milosevic is trying to keep the initiative in the wake of the Chinese embassy bombings, which were commemorated again here in Belgrade today. The father of one of the 3 Chinese journalists killed in the embassy bomb. His daughter had been sleeping in the embassy compound. The ceremony at Belgrade's new cemetery this morning was for diplomats and the media, as well as relatives. The government wanted a public show of grief and anger. The Chinese community here are in despair. One woman said, now they've attacked the embassy, there's no safe place left in Belgrade. Next time, maybe you, maybe me. Jelena Radojkovic is Serbian. Her boyfriend Fu Ming, Chinese.
All the foreigners who stayed here, not many, but mostly are Chinese. They are brave, like Serbian, I believe, so they stay with us. And no one deserves to leave this. I hope your people will never go through this hell.
I'm deeply sorry for my Chinese people here, but I think they die for peace. But this costs too much. I know our government will have a reaction to everything, they should do, but this costs too much.
As the coffins were brought out, ready for cremation and the return of the ashes to China, few here would accept NATO's explanation that this was an accident. Here, people prefer to believe it's part of a NATO strategy to delay a diplomatic solution, and Chinese officials were reluctant to accept NATO apologies.
So we think the NATO should take the full responsibility, and my government reserves the right of taking further measures.
This is now the focus for Serbian anger against NATO. The bombed-out Chinese embassy here in Belgrade is becoming a symbol of opposition to NATO bombing, both by Serbs and Chinese. And it's having another impact. It's bringing China much more into the diplomatic process of trying to end this war. The Chinese have now said that they won't agree to any UN Security Council resolution until the bombing stops. That strengthens the hand of Slobodan Milosevic. Indeed, the Japanese diplomat Yasushi Akashi, a former UN envoy, seemed to get little in the way of concessions from President Milosevic today.
We discussed some specific aspects, but particularly what kind of international civil and security presences there will be, and he showed a strong preference for UN type of presence rather than NATO type of presence.
Offerings for the dead. But President Milosevic's offerings to pull out some troops from Kosovo and to accept a small, lightly armed UN force show that he feels he can drive a hard bargain with a weakened NATO. Lindsay Hilson, Channel 4 News, Belgrade.
This is the last time Serbian forces staged a pullout from Kosovo 6 months ago in a peace agreement which quickly collapsed. The Yugoslavs are talking of withdrawing to peacetime levels, an ambiguous phrase. President Milosevic may be trying to take a propaganda initiative hot on the heels of NATO's disastrous hit on the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. The alliance was quick to reject the Serbian moves.
They have said that they will withdraw some forces. Now, we have made it perfectly clear that we do not believe that the Kosovo refugees will feel able to return if they know that there are any significant number of troops, paramilitaries or special police left. That is why I have to say what's proposed is only a half measure. It is not good enough.
In China, the feelings of outrage at NATO's bombing of their embassy in Belgrade may have been genuine enough, but those protesting in Beijing and other cities lacked a certain spontaneity. For the third day running, demonstrators have been arriving at the US embassy with their stones and under the gaze of the police been burning flags, throwing missiles, shouting slogans and then moving on. The authorities have organized a route which takes the protesters past the British embassy nearby. Anger which was less orchestrated was on show in Hong Kong. There are fears that trade with the West will suffer, with the Chinese government suspending talks on arms control and human rights as it demanded an apology from the USA, which it duly received from Bill Clinton today.
But I think it's very important to remember that this was an isolated, tragic event, while the ethnic cleansing of Kosovo, which has led to the killing of thousands of people and the relocation of hundreds of thousands, is a deliberate and systematic crime.
At the International Court of Justice in The Hague, Belgrade charged the 10 NATO countries most involved with airstrikes with genocide against the Yugoslav people. It asked the court to order a halt to the bombing campaign. The legal move was greeted with bitter derision by the British government.
This is little more than nauseating hypocrisy, coming as it does from a group of murderous thugs and genocidal killers who've been responsible for so much over the last few months.
Despite the outburst of anti-NATO feelings by Chinese all over the world, including Pakistan, some seasoned diplomats see a potential benefit in the airstrike blunder. It may draw Beijing more closely into the search for peace through the United Nations.
I expect that after the great emotional reaction in China, the real interest of China now is to go not into permanent confrontation with the West for economic and political reasons. So I hope when the Russians support this plan and this UN resolution, China will be not in the way, but we may lose some days.
In a camp where there are 30,000 stories of injustice, retribution is already being planned. A British military intelligence officer leads a refugee to a small compound to take his evidence of war crimes.
On the arm?
Inside a cool, dark tent, another intelligence officer with an interpreter listens to the man's story of eviction at gunpoint.
I am so sure that they was the man of Arkansas.
The name he mentions is one to be feared, Arkan. Close by, other members of this intelligence unit collate their material using computers and prepare files for the War Crimes Tribunal in The Hague. One day they'll interview these men. We found them in a transit camp on the border, men who bore the marks of a Serbian interrogation. They were separated from their families and questioned about links with the KLA. After several days of beatings, they were released.
but 78 of their neighbours, taken at the same time, have now disappeared.
One by one. He says I was beaten by 3 soldiers, 3 policemen. And he said that they said to me that we will kill you, you are KLA.
What did they hit him with?
Whatever they had in their hands.
The bruises will go, but their memories one day may be recalled in court. And again today the border was shut. Those refugees who want to cross must for the time being remain in Kosovo. Governments can shut frontiers, but they can't shut their eyes to what is happening. There isn't much for the refugees over here. Money and resources are quite short, but at least over here no one's being tortured and no one's being killed. And for those who have nothing, that is plenty. Colin Baker, ITN, on the Macedonia-Kosovo border.
Today, ITN obtained these exclusive pictures from a front line 5 kilometres inside Kosovo. They were taken by a Kosovar cameraman who spent a week with the KLA. Fighting has intensified in recent days, and though the KLA are hopelessly outgunned, they claim NATO's bombing raids have enabled them to push back demoralised units of the Yugoslav army. They say many of the mortars they are firing have been seized from the Serbs. And the pictures also show Serb positions and uniforms allegedly captured during this assault. For these men, any success by the KLA is cause for celebration. But other pictures from the Drenica region of Kosovo show the Serb assault on ethnic Albanian villages goes on. The Serbs say they're trying to flush out KLA fighters they brand as terrorists. But despite 6 weeks of NATO bombing raids, Serb tanks are still clearly on the move. And the result is that in nearby villages, entire communities are fleeing for their lives. We've seen them streaming across Kosovo's borders, but these pictures show the beginning of the long and dangerous trek to Albania and Macedonia. If Kosovo is not yet empty of its ethnic Albanian population, it soon will be. Although KLA leaders say talk of a partial Serb withdrawal is a fraud, they do believe NATO's bombing is so degrading Serb forces that they will pull out of Kosovo within a matter of weeks. And again today, NATO jets were pounding Serb positions just across the border here. The bombers swooped down on what are believed to be Serb artillery sites and troop concentrations high in the hills. And from the Albanian side of the border could be seen the results of their work. Mark Austin, ITN, on the Kosovo-Albanian border.
The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights set off for the southern city of Niš, which has been hit by a series of cluster bombs. She stopped along the road, hearing that another air raid was underway even as she approached, but decided to carry on nonetheless. When she arrived, she was told a cluster bomb had landed on an apartment block just an hour or so before. This man said shrapnel had gone through his curtains. She saw bomblets, some unexploded, lying around, and heard from the mayor of Niš that 100 people have been injured by shrapnel from cluster bombs dropped on his town.
One of the question marks, and it's not for me to answer, I'm not a military expert, but if you have purely an air campaign, to what extent more are you exposing civilians?
Some NATO leaders may be uncomfortable that the Human Rights Commissioner has questioned their methods of waging a war which they say is in defence of human rights. But Mrs. Robinson was also critical of President Milosevic for refusing to see her and for what she called a devastating pattern of ethnic cleansing in Kosovo.
I was very anxious to meet him because I've had a direct witness myself of the human rights violations suffered by a large number of Kosovar Albanians, what drove them from their homes directly. And it has been people in uniform, army uniform, police uniform, paramilitary uniform.
Those people in uniform are now supposed to be withdrawing from Kosovo, although these pictures of just 150 soldiers of the Pristina Corps apparently going aren't any kind of proof. General Lazarevic, commander of the Corps, said they were returning to their home garrison, leaving just enough to defend Kosovo from terrorists. But NATO insists it's seen no sign of a real pullout yet. There is no acknowledgement here that the armed forces have been responsible for atrocities in Kosovo, still less that there has been the systematic campaign the Human Rights Commissioner described. Lindsay Hilson, Channel 4 News, Belgrade.
Get a grip, Mr. President. That's been the advice from virtually all sides here in the past couple of days. Today, Bill Clinton tried to respond, tried to refocus everyone's attention on Slobodan Milosevic, rather than his leadership of the Allied war.
You think the Germans would have perpetrated the Holocaust on their own without Hitler? Was there something in the history of the German race that made them do this? No, we gotta get straight about this. This is something political leaders do. And if people make decisions to do these kinds of things, other people can make decisions to stop them, and that is exactly what we intend to do.
Behind the impassioned defence of the war, however, the misgivings. Mr. Clinton here publicly regretting at first his failure to deal with the Balkan crisis, to stand up to Milosevic years ago.
And I regret it now more than I can say.
And then going out of his way to insist that NATO still stands together, the United States at the helm.
And help them. Far better for us all to work together, to be firm, to be resolute, to be determined to resolve this now.
Back to the language of war then. Notice the repeated comparisons today to Hitler and the Holocaust. Witnessed the fairly dramatic escalation of the air campaign in Europe. But this just a week after the Americans told the Allies to get aboard the Russian peace train, a train that's been so seriously derailed since. It all raises the question, is there a strategy, or does this White House simply lurch from one path to another? And who's really leading this war? Bill Clinton or Tony Blair?
No, I don't see a coherent strategy. I never have seen a coherent strategy in this war. I think it's one where, let's bomb for a while and see what happens, and then regroup. And I'm just not real pleased with the way it's been going on.
Do you think Clinton's leading on this?
I think he's leading. He's being a very poor leader if he's the one leading.
As for leadership, well, for a good week now, ever since Mr. Clinton started wobbling on who would make up any ground force, the mantle has been passed, effectively, some think deliberately offered, to Tony Blair. Is Bill Clinton leading at this juncture?
I think your Prime Minister has taken most of the lead on this conflict, and that's, from my perspective, not necessarily in the best interest of our country.
Do you think the American people understand the war, Mr. President?
I think they are probably frustrated that it's not already over, but I said in the beginning, we have to be prepared to pay the price of time.
With this president, of course, the questions never go away. Can Bill Clinton lead? Does he know where he's heading, or is he simply making it up as he goes along? Yet the mere fact those questions are being asked at all says so much about the sense of drift here at this critical stage of war.
The fighting continued today between Serb forces and KLA rebels along the Kosovo-Albania border. 2 days ago, a freelance British cameraman filmed one battle actually inside Albania, where the Serbs seized a village. Our senior correspondent Mark Austin reports.
It is a war spreading across Yugoslavia's borders. These are Albanian fighters in a gun battle with Serb soldiers inside Albania. For the second time in 5 weeks, a small unit of Yugoslav soldiers have captured and occupied this Albanian village in an attempt to cut supply lines to the KLA. These men are civilians, villagers, joining Albanian border police, trying to defend their land and their homes. The Serbs are in our village, he says. We're civilians defending our land, adds this man. The British cameraman who filmed this fighting said it went on through the evening and at least 3 villagers were killed. European monitors today confirmed the Serb incursion on Tuesday of this week and said they held the village for 24 hours. This whole area is a stronghold of the KLA, and clearly it throws into question President Milosevic's earlier claim that all operations against the Kosovo rebels had ended. The Serbs withdrew when Albanian troops became involved, but they fear the Serbs mined the village before they left. It's KLA bases like this one, just inside Kosovo, that the Serbs are determined to cut off. And the rebels are clearly suffering casualties from what may prove to be a final Serb push before a withdrawal. But NATO jets have Serb frontier positions in their sights. All the while, NATO is intensifying its bombing in this border area several times today. Bombing runs by NATO jets against Serb positions just on the hills here. Time and time again, they swept across the sky, swooping down on Serb positions just a few kilometers inside Kosovo. Yet another day of aerial bombardment intended to bring the Yugoslav army to its knees. Mark Austin, ITN, on the Kosovo-Albania border.
Good evening. NATO stands accused tonight of another tragic bombing error, by far the worst yet in the campaign against Yugoslavia. The Serb authorities say more than 100 ethnic Albanians died when NATO cluster bombs fell on the village of Korisha in Kosovo. NATO says it's investigating. The Serb authorities took our correspondent Julian Mannion to Kosovo, although they severely restricted his filming. So far in the war, he's been shown damage to civilian areas only. His report of the scenes in Korisha contains pictures you may find distressing.
The first cameras to reach the scene recorded what appears to be another tragic NATO blunder. Some 20 tractors apparently belonging to refugees were wrecked. Some were still burning. Scattered through the area, the mangled corpses of Albanians apparently caught in a heavy NATO airstrike. Cameramen found a group of shocked survivors hiding in a village cellar. They told of their near miraculous escape.
There were 5 explosions. There were many deaths, many people injured. When we came out, we saw all the dead and injured. We did our best to take the injured to hospital.
One Yugoslav official told us that the refugees had been turned back by Serbian police who urged them to return to their homes. The refugees apparently decided to stay overnight in the village of Korisha, many of them bedding down in a large warehouse which was later struck by several NATO bombs in the middle of the night. Today, survivors are said to be bewildered and despairing after this tragedy inflicted by an air force that came to help them. A Yugoslav official who's just returned from the bombed village is claiming that this is NATO's worst mistake so far. Confirmed details are few, but it seems possible that NATO pilots attacked what they believed was a military concentration, but was in fact a large group of refugees. We're expecting to be taken to the scene tomorrow. Julian Mannion, ITN, Pristina.
This morning at the Daily Ministry of Defence briefing, it was stressed that the alliance never deliberately attacks civilians.
Can I make it absolutely clear that NATO only attacks military targets? If there is any doubt, if there is any question that civilians are at risk, then on many occasions over the past 7 or 8 weeks, our planes have moved away without dropping their weapons because they weren't absolutely sure that the target was entirely a military target.
And despite this latest incident, there's no sign of any slowdown in the bombing. Instead, Britain is moving 12 RAF Tornadoes to Corsica to put them within easier reach of targets in Kosovo, and putting another 2,300 troops on standby. But the Korisha attack is likely to make the Russians and Chinese more determined to push for an end to the bombing before any progress towards an agreement can be made. Lauren Taylor, ITN.
Well, I have spent the last few days in the Balkans, where the military hardware continues to build up. I went to Macedonia, where I talked to British troops stationed in Petrovic. I visited 2 of the largest refugee camps at Cigrani and Stenkovic, and the frontier post at Blair. Just on the other side of the border, our diplomatic correspondent Lindsay Hilsum spent the weekend in Kosovo. Along with other journalists, she was taken by the Serb authorities to Korisha, where up to 100 refugees were killed after a NATO attack, and to Pristina. Her work was restricted by Yugoslav supervision.
This is all that remains of the lives and possessions of the 80 Albanians who died at Korisha. We were brought here by the Serb authorities. The story we pieced together reveals that Albanian peasants who had fled to the hills are now being ordered by the Serb police to return to their home villages, and that the air war makes their lives ever more dangerous. While we were there, another NATO bomb landed, just a few miles away. The survivors of Korisha. I asked Said Rajai why the villagers had initially fled to the hills. They, he said, not mentioning who, started to burn our houses, and we were frightened. Last week, the Serb police told these people to return to Korisha and stay in the building, which was bombed. It's not obvious they were being used as a human shield, But it's clear that despite the air campaign, the Serb authorities are able to keep the small Albanian population left in Kosovo under close control. On the road heading from the capital Pristina towards the village of Podijevo, we came across another group of Albanians. They'd been trying to go to Pristina, but the Serb police told them to go home.
They took us off the bus and said you have to go back to get permission to travel.
The Albanian quarter of Pristina, trashed at the beginning of the war, now quiet. These Albanians said they were still trying to go to Skopje in Macedonia. They were allowed to board the bus, but we don't know if they'll be allowed to cross the border. Pristina feels somewhat surreal. At night, there's the constant hum of NATO aircraft overhead. This area was destroyed about 6 weeks ago, but NATO's intensified its campaign since then. Even when you can't see the bombing, you can hear its thunder. But the Serbs don't seem to be about to give in. The bomb damage to the centre of Pristina is obvious. But, maybe not surprisingly, the most senior Yugoslav military officer in Kosovo denies NATO's assertion that the air campaign has seriously hurt the army.
I can reassure you that the military damage has been minimal to Pristina Corps and the Yugoslav army as a whole.
We were taken to see a small unit apparently preparing to leave Kosovo. The authorities say they've defeated the Kosovo Liberation Army. This was a show for the camera. We saw no other signs of a pullout. But nor does the army look as if it's been broken by the NATO air campaign. They say they want to negotiate their withdrawal.
It depends on developments. It depends on whether the NATO aggressor accepts the peaceful initiative of our high command. It depends on whether they will give us time to successfully complete the withdrawal operation.
The politicians in Belgrade who control these troops may be pushing now for some kind of deal. But the NATO air campaign doesn't seem to have weakened them so much that they'll just hand over Kosovo to international control.
Well, remaining inside Kosovo, tens of thousands of people are said tonight still to be on the move, desperate to escape the horrors hidden from the world outside. NATO says it is tracking 2 large groups of refugees, the biggest headed for Albania, whilst Serb forces are stopping thousands more from reaching Macedonia. Some were allowed out yesterday. I witnessed the largest forced deportation of Kosovar Albanians to reach the border in a fortnight as they crossed it at Blair. The abnormal has become almost normal. 600 got through yesterday. Perhaps 2,000 have been turned back today. Some of these have tried 3 times and more to get through, and as they come, sons disappear, fathers are detained, and families become divided, arriving in safe havens miles apart. At Macedonia's main airport, we met Menderes, a Kosovar refugee, come back from Britain to try to find his family. We were to travel with him. He had defected from the Serbian army and fled the Balkans 7 years ago. In all those years, struggling for asylum in Britain and afraid to return home to Kosovo, he had never seen his family. But now he had heard that they too had been forced to flee across the border.
They started the journey in 3 tractors, they told me, and about 84 of them in 3 tractors. Can you believe how scorched and crowded, overcrowded, because they fearful of their life.
A white scar on the hillside marks the camp he thinks they're in. Somewhere amid these 38,000 souls, Menderes has cousins, aunts, uncles. Even now, there is no register of all the people here, no map as to who is where. The UNHCR can't help us, perhaps someone else can.
OSCE is doing the registration. Okay. Where is the OSCE? There, I saw them.
As we continue our search, children begin shouting a name, but not one of Menderes' relatives. Blair, they shout. the British Prime Minister still seen here as one key to their salvation. News of Menderes' cousins follows fast. An amazing impromptu network delivers word of them. And quite suddenly, there they are. His first family contact in 7 years.
She looks younger. I think she's...
But his flattery to an aunt he hasn't seen for so long gains this response. You've grown up, she says. You've become big like a German. But the joy is mixed with awful sadness. So many men who never made it here. Detained, missing or dead. His uncle says, we're all fine, but so many of us are not here. And even for those who are, the living conditions are hard. Just a family name on a tent and space inside for 7. Menderes' mother, it turns out, is in yet another camp half an hour away. He must now search again. If Menderes' family is ever to go home, this British armour on exercise on hills above the camps will be their escort. But this exercise appears to be preparing for something more aggressive than the waving drivers and the politicians currently suggest. This is what they would call a permissive environment. This exercise centres on this being Kosovo, and this is what anybody left there would see as the tanks roll. This build-up is 2 months old. The politicians worry about the casualties, but the forces appear ready.
We're just preparing ourselves for any possibility of actually moving into Kosovo.
So if you got the call, you could go how quickly?
We're on 2 hours' notice to move.
Living rough with their camouflaged armour, there are military pressures for getting these men on the move, humanitarian pressures too. What is still happening tonight inside Kosovo? On the edge of the refugee camps, British officers are debriefing the eyewitnesses.
And if they're happy to talk to us and haven't talked to anyone before, we bring them back here and we talk to them perhaps for a couple of hours about what they've experienced.
And basically you are assembling a kind of evidence file for the War Crimes Tribunal?
That's correct, yes.
The accounts are graphic and consistent. But other intelligence is emerging too of patterns of paramilitary deployment that will assist NATO forces come the moment the return of the refugees has to be secured. In the heat of early summer, children splash in a stream that runs through their camp. But the greatest pressure on NATO amid the rising temperatures is winter. The UN is adamant it is an enormous problem.
We have to plan for 2 scenarios. Either we winterize this camp and the 8 others like it, or we're going to have to start winterizing some of the destroyed homes and villages in Kosovo. So right now
winter here gets down to minus 25. Could you do that?
We can do that. There are special tents that can be purchased, but we have to order those now. There are only a couple of places in the world that make these things. So we have been told if you're going to winterize these camps, start in May.
Already the men that have survived Serbia's atrocities sit bored and frustrated anywhere there is shade. Children chant Kosovan guerrilla songs. Herein another pressure for NATO. How long will the camps manage to restrain their populations from action? The only improbable option, a far larger airlift than the meagre lists for flights that currently adorn the camps. Menderes is still looking for his mother. Another guard, another camp. At last, evidence that she is really here. Everyone seems to know her. She arrived 6 weeks ago. Menderes' family, like so many other Kosovars, lived in a 6-bedroomed house with electricity and central heating, a washing machine and a television. His sister-in-law greets him at the door of their tent. Finally, Mum. I never thought I'd see you again, she cries. But yet again, in the midst of joy, the abject pain of loss. Menderes has come home. His brother's wife knows she will never see her man again. Later, Menderes' mother talks of the 4 days spent out in the open in flight from Kosovo. Then embracing all and sundry for the safe delivery of a son she had lost to the Serb army so many years ago. Does she still want to try to go home?
Of course. They burned the house, we haven't got a house.
Don't worry, he says, we'll build it up again. This is NATO's nightmare question, redressing forced deportation and atrocity, and whether we should leave her return to the chancy hope that bombs alone will guarantee it. Well, I spoke with General Sir Mike Jackson whilst I was in the Balkans, a veteran of the Bosnian Peace Implementation Force. He's now in charge of the 14,000 NATO troops stationed in Macedonia. And I asked him if President Milosevic were to agree to NATO's demands right now, improbable though that might be, would his force be able to do what was needed to get the refugees home?
Yes, I mean, we've been here for some time. We came here to implement a peace agreement following, hopefully, Rambouillet, but that didn't work. But yes, that's what we're here to do, and we can do it very quickly.
But a lot of people are saying you'll need far more men than you've got here if you're going to get the refugees home.
Yes, the original force was 28,000 or thereabouts. We've got about half that here in theatre, and the other half will be able to get here pretty quickly. So I'm confident we'll be able to do that job.
What does pretty quickly mean?
A week or two.
But could you afford a week or two?
Well, I've got the force I've got here, you see.
Yeah.
That will get us going. And frankly, Macedonia is a small country, and to keep 28,000 here waiting would be very burdensome, and I don't think we need to do that at the moment.
General, we've been hearing this phrase, permissive environment, which would enable you to move into Kosovo. What does permissive environment really mean?
With an agreement. And I use here perhaps the parallel, not a template, but a parallel from Bosnia with I-4 at Christmas '95, in which I was involved, whereby you take a force in to implement an agreement, and you have the powers of enforcement, which is why we have quite a bit of combat capability, and that's the plan.
So there could be, say, pockets of disagreement and resistance, and you deal with it.
Of course, yes. I mean, that's what the rules of engagement would give. And again, I refer back to Bosnia with robust rules of engagement. And we never really had to do it at that level. Why? Because they could see we were ready and prepared to do it.
So there doesn't have to be a completely pacified situation inside Kosovo for you to move?
Yes, but these degrees of permissiveness, which I see speculated about, I prefer to talk about with an agreement and without an agreement. That makes it perfectly clear to me where I stand.
And nobody has talked about without an agreement?
No, that's not in the mission.
A lot of people are saying the window of opportunity to get this resolved militarily is very tight, that if you can't move within literally a matter of weeks, you couldn't get the refugees back before winter.
I think that's an exaggeration. Yes, winter is there, and the humanitarian aspects of a Balkan winter are not something to look forward to at all. But there is an urgency, and you can see the air campaign is being intensified. And there is, of course, the parallel diplomatic activity, which is going on as well. But I'm quite clear, we want to get into Kosovo and do that job as quickly as possible.
If you look at what you've got here in Macedonia, 250,000 refugees, could you get them back in a couple of months? I mean, albeit many of them say they'd be prepared to be in tents in their old villages.
It's a massive movement of people, but don't forget they came out pretty quickly as well. I believe, and we are doing some very careful planning, along with the relevant non-government organisations, with giving this a lot of thought. And we must get them back. I mean, it's not an option in my view.
General, do you think that NATO has concentrated too much on the things that have gone wrong, the mistakes, rather than on the strategy?
It is it is inevitable when you prosecute a conflict that there will be sad occasions when innocent people die. I mean, that's what happens. But that must not divert NATO from bringing this conflict to a successful end.
Our main headline tonight, pressure mounting on NATO to send ground forces into Kosovo to reinforce the air campaign. Tony Blair, who's on another trip to the Balkans, said the alliance would do whatever it takes to ensure success against Serb forces. He also dismissed any reports of any rift with America on the strategy ahead. We're back, same time, 7 o'clock tomorrow. Till then, from Krishnan and from me, that's Channel 4 News. Good evening.